Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Market Open. We are live, and we've got a lot to talk about today on this Wednesday, May 6th. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Got a lot of stuff happening in the global capital equity markets. Lots of things to discuss from last night. Lots of things that have happened already in the pre-markets in regards to the macro, Iran, and a variety of earnings that we got. And obviously, as you all saw on the thumbnail, I think it deserved the thumbnail today. You know, it's so funny. One time I did a market close, and, you know, sometimes I'll put Jensen on the thumbnail just because it's Jensen. He's a big part of the stock market. We usually talk about NVIDIA. One day I randomly put Lisa Su on there. They were like, why'd you put Lisa Su on there? I'm like, well, it's Lisa Su. Like, she's also pretty important, right? Like, she matters. And today she absolutely deserves to be on that thumbnail. $409 in the pre-market, 15%. I don't think people can call this advanced money destroyer anymore. We've got a lot to talk about when it comes to AMD, but it's not just AMD. SanDisk up another 3%. Google with a $200 billion deal with Anthropic. We will talk about that. You've got your Microns that are still running. Oracle that's trying to get past 190. Bitcoin finally breaking out above 80. That's helping MicroStrategy, Coinbase, and Robinhood. 82,000 on BTC. GLW Corning, another AI data center infrastructure name, is up 18% because NVIDIA has not only signed a deal with them, but they have a warrant, or they have the agreement to buy 15 million warrants of Corning, essentially agreeing to buy shares of stock. They're not literally buying it right now, but they have an agreement to do it. Same thing that AMD has with Meta and OpenAI. And the market likes it because that's basically another NVIDIA investment. And obviously the NVIDIA investments have obviously done very well. OSS, they had earnings. We'll talk about that. That one crushed it, up 15%. Uber had earnings. They also crushed it. They were up 10. Now they're up 5. So they're giving some of those gains back. And then you got the broader S&P that has hit 728. We were at 731 at one point. Oil is down at 94. It was almost below 90. So we're below 100, which is part of the reason the market is pumping. And this stuff is really important to kind of analyze in the context of why the market is pumping. But there is a reason for why oil is down, and we'll talk about that. There's also a reason why oil spiked up from 90 to 94. We will talk about that as well. But overall, I mean, just a massive, massive day. Or I should say a massive week that we're seeing that has been supported by earnings. I know there's a lot of questions on, does it feel toppy? Does it feel too aggressive? Does it feel like this is the time to take profits? Are we getting ready to have some explosive blow off the top rally? And we will explore that side of the argument as well, because I think there's some important charts to look at. But at its core, the companies that are putting up fantastic earnings and this is a big and they're in the right sector, are getting the bid. And as of now, this AI infrastructure build out looks like it's not stopping, which is why you have a company like AMD that is up at 409, 15% in the pre-market. So lots to talk about. Let's get into it. Oh yeah, Hut signed another deal for a data center. That's up 31%. They were up 40% at one point. So literally, if you are in the data center business, whether you're a Sterling infrastructure that is engaged in construction and you can go up 45% of the day, or you're a Hut and you get these types of deals, if you're an AMD that's obviously supplying the infrastructure for the data center to operate, you're going to get a lot of momentum if you can beat on the earnings or if you can announce new deals. And that's what we're seeing right now. Oscar also crushed it. We'll talk about Oscar in a bit. They're up 9%. Just a really strong earnings given the new cap on CMS rates. And so, yeah, there's still some questions around ACA subsidies, but a lot of the Oscar bulls will tell you the ACA subsidies aren't even really part of the thesis anymore in terms of it being a bear case or like it not being resolved being a bear case. So Oscar right there up 9.8%, and you're seeing this stock go from basically 11 to 20 over the past month, which has been very nice to see. All right, cool. Let's get into it. Let's get started. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Got a lot to talk about, a lot to get into. Again, thank you all for spending your mornings with me, and let's get started with it. Fun Extreme, thanks for the super chat, is the top end. We will also talk about that today because obviously, that is a question that's coming up. I think the number one question, at least I've gotten privately over the past couple of days, is do I sell? Do I take profits? Do I get out of this market? It's feeling uneasy. And I think those are legit questions to ask, but we'll try to look at the data to kind of show both sides on that. All right, before we get into AMD, we just got to do this macro stuff real quick. Trump. So what was announced this morning from Trump? Assuming Iran agrees to give what has been agreed to, which is perhaps a big assumption, the already legendary epic fury will be at an end, and the highly effective blockade will allow the Hormuz Strait to be open to all, including Iran. If they don't agree, the bombing starts, and it will be sadly at a much higher level and intensity than it was before. Thank you for your attention to this matter. So you've got Trump referencing the news that broke from Axios this morning, which was basically that the United States is close to signing a one-page memorandum of understanding, which is, or I should say memorandum of understanding, which is going to be what ends the Iran war and sets a framework for a more detailed nuclear deal. The deal would include Iran committing to a moratorium of uranium enrichment, aka stopping it, the U.S. lifting its sanctions and releasing billions in frozen Iranian funds. That's what, you know, the Iranians have been asking for a long time. Both sides lifting restrictions around transit, so getting rid of the blockade and opening the Strait of Hormuz. A 12 to 15-year duration on Iran's moratorium on uranium enrichment, so maybe not 20 like Trump wanted, maybe not 5 like the Iranians wanted, somewhere in the middle, which is pretty much what most people thought was going to happen. And an end to the war and the beginning of a 30-day negotiation period. So you've got the market basically immediately that got excited about it because, and that's when oil went down to $90 because the market was like, okay, boom, it's over. Our girl Caitlin from the New York Post, who is on a phone number text messaging basis with Trump, said that Trump told her it's too soon to start packing her bags for Islamabad after reports that the U.S. and Iran are close to a peace deal. He said it's too far, it's too much, he said. He previously told me he'd go to Pakistan for a deal signing, but we're not there yet, which kind of explains the Trump tweet this morning about it's a big assumption that Iran agrees to everything that we have told them to agree to. And if they don't, the bombing will start again at an aggressive level. But if they do, then, you know, the deal is signed and boom, the war should be able to come to an end. So I guess the market is pricing it as a 90% chance, like a 95% chance that this war is going to come to an end. Oil prices obviously reflecting that. Oil deeply below $100 right here at 94. But obviously there is that 5% chance that if we do not end the war, then, you know, things could get potentially worse, but the market has started to overlook that. Now, why did oil go from 90 to 94? Iran, 30 minutes ago, launched a new website called the Persian Gulf Strait Authority to oversee traffic through the Strait of Hormuz just minutes after the Axios report claimed that a deal was near to end the war. The site signals plans to charge ships for safe passage, and vessels are expected to receive rules and instructions via email under the new system. So, I mean, I don't think this is realistically a reason for why oil should be spiking from 90 to 94, but the market's interpretation was, okay, there's still going to be some more fees that are attached to the vessels that are going through the Strait of Hormuz, at least in the initial phases, unless that gets negotiated away. And as a result, you know, there might be some issues on margins for these oil companies, obviously, that can't afford to pay these fees, given the price of oil is already so high. So, I mean, that was like one reason. And that's also the reason the market fell a little bit. Like, we were actually even more green than we are right now. S&P is at what, 728? Yeah, we were at 731.63. When that headline came out, kind of got the market to be like, okay, hold on. We don't know exactly all the details on this. But regardless, you're still seeing a decent chunk of green. And, you know, it is good to see that oil is coming down. The biggest bear case for the market, that at least that I've been hearing over the past couple of days, is oil cannot be this high with the market continuing to rally. Well, oil's not this high anymore. And so if that starts to come down, at least you've got that part of the bear case that's still there, but maybe not there as much as it was in terms of proportion to the level of concern that people are having if oil continues to fall. And if we get below 90, that obviously would be a good thing. The 10-year, by the way, 4.358, it is below 4.45. So hopefully it comes below 4.3. Ships are not officially going through yet. So we will see on the initial traffic that gets released tonight if ships are officially going through. Iran has said they are getting ready to open up the strait, but time will tell if ships actually go through, and, you know, we can start getting more supply in the market to help oil come down. So that's what we got in the macro. Let's talk about AMD. Didn't Tom Lee say 7,300 would be the top? We will get to the toppy potential part of this discussion, but yes, Tom Lee did say 7,300 would be the top, and then he's expecting a 20% drawdown from here. We'll talk about if that possibly could happen. You got a lot more people thinking it is possible, not even because of Tom Lee's thesis, but just because it just feels like it's too quick, too fast, too much leverage, too much margin. Again, there are those arguments, but then there are the arguments around earnings growth. And this is why AMD is getting the pump right here. 409, it touched 432 at one point. So when the market opens, we're going to see if people take profits or if people end up actually buying the dip on this. and see how this ends up playing out. Now, why is AMD up? So first of all, they did not crush earnings in the way that Intel crushed earnings. Very important to understand this. They beat EPS by 6%. They beat revenue by 7%. So it wasn't like a 30, 40% beat. It wasn't like a 2,000% beat that Intel did. So the initial reaction was actually red. The stock fell about 4%. And I think a lot of people had said, all right, it had a massive run and, it was priced for perfection. We needed to take some profits. However, once we got on the call, and a little bit before the call started pumping, but really Lisa Su on the call got the market to once again recognize kind of what's going on here. And there's 3 letters that are relevant, and those 3 letters are CPUs. So what did Lisa Su say? In the past, the CPU to GPU ratio was primarily just as a host node in like a 1:4 or 1:8 configuration. Now it is changing and getting closer to a 1:1 configuration. You can even imagine if you get lots of agents that you could have more CPUs than GPUs. And that right there, folks, is the simple 3 sentences. That is why AMD has added $100 billion of market cap. They beat revenue by a couple $100 million. And that along with this paragraph you're looking at on the screen, I think was enough to get the market cap to go up by literally $100 billion. They're going to open up at around a $640 billion market cap. And it's based on this idea of the future assumptions. The market's not looking at PE. The market's not looking at price of sales. Obviously, AMD has that at an elevated level given the price increase. The market is looking at, wait a second, is this AMD's NVIDIA to 2023 moment? Just like it was Intel's NVIDIA 2023 moment, theoretically. Now, Intel's got to keep putting up the growth for it to be sustainable. Intel right there, 112. But Intel at $65 going into the print basically said the CPU shortage is real and we are the leader in it. AMD confirming that. Now, it didn't show up in the AMD numbers. The AMD guidance was increased, not substantially, but it was an increase of guidance. But I think the street is looking at 2028, 2029, 2030. Is Lisa Su really on track to get that $20 of EPS? And if she can get that $20 of EPS, you put a 30 times multiple on it, boom, you have a $600 stock. That's $1 trillion market cap. Obviously, a lot of that is being priced in before they put up that type of growth, which is what happens when there's a lot of excitement and momentum around a name. We've seen that happen in tech all the time. And today, the bulls and the bears will have to figure out if that excitement is warranted. But if you're a bull and you think that type of growth is going to happen in the way that Lisa Su says it's going to happen, and it gets that $20 of EPS, I mean, yeah, you front run that. And obviously, that's what is explaining this 15% move that we're seeing right now. Does NVIDIA have the CPU vertical? Yes. The Vera Rubin, the Vera is the CPU, the Rubin is the GPU. Jensen has talked many times about the ecosystem of CPUs and how NVIDIA is ready for that overall shift, and not really shift, but that overall agentic inference layer that is going to require more CPUs, which is what has led AMD and Intel to have all this demand. NVIDIA right there, 200 in the pre-markets. Having said that, I think the reason NVIDIA, to answer the obvious question that everyone's asking, why is NVIDIA not running in the way that AMD or Intel or all these other companies are running? There's 2 simple answers. Number one, it's a $5 trillion company, which means it's harder for it to move at the level that it's moving at. And number 2, and this gets us into the Google conversation yesterday, it's funny, right? Corning's running 18%. Most of the companies working with NVIDIA are getting a bid, but NVIDIA is not getting a bid. But I think there is a perception, and this is not bearish, but nonetheless, you have to acknowledge the perception, and the perception in and of itself is intrinsically bearish, even if it's not actually practically bearish for the company. The idea is that their moat around the market share that they have in the chip space is starting to come under question. Now, maybe those questions are going to be irrelevant when Jensen puts up another massive quarter in a couple weeks. But the point is, when Anthropic commits to spending $200 billion with Google over the next 5 years on their TPUs, which Google, when it opens, is going to be more valuable than NVIDIA. It has overtaken it in terms of market cap. And then when this CPU revolution is starting to inflect demand for NVIDIA and Intel, you put those together along with the large market cap that NVIDIA has had. And, Google also has a large market cap, but Google was half the market cap more than half than it was at. Yeah, right now it's at 4. It was less than 2, right? So it was more than 50% lower than it is today. Or sorry, it's at 5 now, so it was less than 2.5. Just last year in May of 2025, NVIDIA was still holding that $3.5 to $4.5 trillion market cap basically for the past 7 months. So at this point, Google grew into becoming a $5 trillion company, which it's going to be close to opening up today, 4.8, 4.9 trillion. NVIDIA has been there for about 7 months. So, NVIDIA has been trying to hold on to their momentum. And obviously that's why it's been flat. Google has been growing into that momentum, which is why Google has been a much more fun ride in terms of its stock price. So I think the perception of AMD, the perception of Intel, the perception of Google, all this momentum that's happening. I mean, obviously Amazon, right? 20 billion run rate on Trainium chips. Jassy saying if we didn't have all these other external variables, it would be a $50 billion run rate business. That gets the street to start to question exactly why we are paying the multiple that we are paying for NVIDIA, even if that multiple is cheaper than, you know, an AMD, which obviously when the market opens, it's going to be a hell of a lot cheaper than it is for AMD. So I think that's what you got going on. NVIDIA is the center of the AI revolution, but all the other derivative beneficiaries are now starting to benefit, like a Corning, which is, you know, market cap 139 billion, price of sales of 9. Obviously, it's more expensive than NVIDIA on a multiple basis, but at the end of the day, if they are going to be getting a lot of investment, a lot of demand, a lot of more deals, if you announce more deals in this market, you are the beneficiary, which is basically what Intel did also with Tesla, SpaceX, et cetera. I mean, that's just driving the momentum. And that is why I think we're seeing as much green as we're getting right here. Lisa Su is going to be on CNBC in a bit. Let me see if she's on right now. We're going to take a listen to her. Meta also has Warren Stone 10% of AMD. Do you think they'll catch a bid one of these days? We'll talk about Meta and Microsoft in a second, but I will say it's a good point you bring that up. Meta is very incentivized to spend with AMD because they own 10% of it when it gets to 600 at 1 penny a share. So that's what their warrants have priced at. Also OpenAI. So you would imagine that some of these other hyperscalers would be incentivized to lean into the inference revolution because they need the agentic inference working on their applications that they're spending all this capex on, but also the CPU part of what AMD is building, one could argue is incredibly valuable for them. So they're going to spend more and they have more of a stake in the company that they're spending in. Meta does not get any shares of NVIDIA if they keep spending with NVIDIA, right? So you've also got that general other argument that hyperscalers are annoyed of paying the NVIDIA tax, and they're going to have to pay it for the foreseeable future. But if they can limit how much they're paying that NVIDIA tax, maybe that is the perception for why the street is keeping NVIDIA at these levels. Nonetheless, I think Jensen's going to absolutely crush it in a couple weeks. But, you know, if we had to make an argument for it, then that is your argument. Also, you got Qualcomm. They didn't announce anything too crazy, but the CPU revolution going to them, that's up 4.79%. ARM is reporting later after the bell. ARM's up another 9%. It topped out at 240, went down to 195. Now it's at 228. CPU is helping them. And then obviously Intel also getting some love, 3% based on CPUs. Software, not doing the best still. IGV is down. Palantir is down. ServiceNow down. So FinTech down. Dave had a great earnings, down 9%. Robinhood is only up because of Bitcoin. If it wasn't for Bitcoin, this thing wouldn't really be getting that much love. SoFi's up a little bit, up 20 cents. At the end of the day, the same theme that we've been talking about for the past couple of weeks, I think continues to be relevant. And maybe it'll shift, but as of now, the blooms that are already up 80% year to date are up another 2% in the pre-market. Your Nebuses, which have gone parabolic, up another 2% in the pre-market. If you put up good earnings and you're in the right sector, the sector being AI and semiconductors or the supply chain for that, I mean, you're winning, right? Micron, this thing went explosive last night. It got almost to 690 because Lisa Su talked about memory is the bottleneck. It's at 667 right now. We'll see how the market opens up. But you are seeing just absolutely parabolic movement. SanDisk got almost to 1,500 last night. It's at 1,454, up another 4% after being up 12% in the pre-market. So, yeah, the market doesn't, and it's not just, you know, a Hood or a SoFi. The market doesn't care about Meta. Meta's up 65 cents in the pre-market after the war is functionally claimed to be over and oil's down 7%. Meta can't catch a bid. Microsoft actually red in the pre. It is phenomenal seeing this level of rotation, but I also understand why people are asking why this rotation is happening and also questioning if this rotation is legitimate enough to, you know, last for a very long time. Like eventually is this money going to come back to Meta or is it just going to keep going back into the Microns of the world? And right now, obviously, we're seeing where that momentum is going. All right, Lisa Su's about to be on CNBC. Let's cover a couple of earnings before she gets on. OSS absolutely crushed the quarter, 14%. This is one of the small picks I like in the context of edge compute and the amount of government contracts they have. Revenue, 55% year over year. That's up 8.1 million. Gross margin, 610 basis points up year over year, 51.6%. Adjusted EBITDA came in at 0.2 million versus negative 0.16 expected. 2026 revenue growth, they're guiding to 25%. 2026 gross margins, they're guiding to 40%. And they're expecting positive adjusted EBITDA and overall EBITDA for the year. They have 34 million in cash. They have nearly 15 million in Q1 bookings, which is up and among the strongest level for the quarters that are for the companies that are in their industry. And they basically said that they have massively strong demand around rugged AI and edge compute. And as a result, you know, you're seeing that market momentum. The real thesis on OSS is they get a massive contract. They have a lot of prototype contracts. They get for 15 million, 20 million. They get a contract one day for 200, 300 million. The market cap is 200 million. That stock is instantly up a lot that day. So that is what I think people are holding out for, but the long-term thesis is intact. And again, companies across the board are beating on levels that they need to beat at, which is getting the market excited. Even Disney, up 6%. Disney has been relatively flat all year, but they ended up beating on earnings, and they're showing stronger growth. AI is a tailwind for a lot of these companies, especially around margin efficiency, which is important. Disney beat by 5% on EPS, 157 versus 150. They beat by 1% on revenue. EPS up 8% year-over-year, revenue up 7% year-over-year. That stock is green. Now, Uber missed on revenue very slightly, 13.2 versus 13.2.6, but they beat on EPS by 4%, 72 cents versus 69 cents. So you had Uber that did get a 10% bid, and now that bid is about 6.5%. This one's also been stuck. It's not really part of this AI revolution per se, but they put up some good numbers, and Bill Ackman owns about 3 billion of this. So hopefully this one gets some love. Non-GAAP EPS up 44%, third straight quarter of 21% gross bookings growth, and nearly 10 billion of TTM free cash flow. And they now have 50 million members with 50% gross bookings coverage. They also did $3 billion of buybacks. So, regardless of if the stock is moving crazy like some of these other chip names, the point is they are putting up good numbers, which is going to prove or at least hopefully proves the health of the S&P 500 in terms of the multiples trading at, given the earnings growth. Is Lisa Su live? Let's see. She's supposed to be live in a second. Not yet. She's going to be on in a little bit, and then we'll get to her. What caused the oil dump? The reason oil dumped is because Trump announced that they have officially basically sent over a deal, and he's skeptical that Iran is going to agree to it, but he is hopeful that they will agree to it. The details of the deal, I think, are relatively reasonable in the context of no nuclear uranium enrichment, sanctions relief, yada, yada. And that's why oil tanked. So hopefully that sustains itself, because that would be very good for broader markets to, hold up the crazy run that they've had. And again, one can say it's not crazy because of the earnings growth, but one can also say it's parabolic. I guess you could say it's definitely crazy in the context of oil being this high. So if oil drops, even if the market doesn't explode higher, at least the market can maybe sustain these current levels. And that would be, the most important thing that we have to see. ASML, that is also correct. That is also here at all-time highs. I mean, and again, we'll see. I think the reason Trump said it is a large assumption, as you can see on the screen right there, that Iran will agree to this deal, but he's hopeful that'll happen. And if they don't agree to it, then I guess we're back into a headline-driven market and potentially might see some downside. ASML 1500 in the pre-markets as well. Okay, so let's answer this question that a lot of people are asking, which is, hey, Amit, it feels toppy. It feels, and what exactly is going on right here? There's a couple stats I want to show people, because I think, those concerns are legitimate just based on seeing the level of price action, but also it is combated with earnings growth, which we've talked about a lot. Nonetheless, everyone has to kind of make their own decisions in terms of how this is playing out. So first of all, these are the most bought US stocks by Koreans over the past month. SOXL, triple leverage semis, Intel, which obviously already has had a massive run, DRAM, which is the memory ETF, and SanDisk, which just keeps going up and up and up. Why am I bringing that up? We have talked extensively about how South Korea and South Korean investors in particular have a history of not only gambling, it's part of the culture of that country, but also levering up aggressively. I mean, they were kind of the main buyers of Poet. They got Poet from 6 to 17. Poet's now at 10, obviously fell from 17 to 6. That was primarily rooted in the little bit of due diligence that I did about Poet. It was the South Koreans that were the ones putting out all the DD and the blogs and all this stuff about it. This is the Kospi, which is the South Korean index. It's up 220%, 221% in the past 12 months. Imagine the S&P 500 was up 220% in the past 12 months. Now, that's likely not going to happen ever, just because the U.S. is much bigger than South Korea. But the point is, an entire country's index being up this much, a lot of it being contributed by Samsung, which is now officially $1 trillion company. By the way, Samsung will do more operating profit than Google by the end of the year. It's kind of crazy to imagine, but that's going to happen. And SK Hynix, which is also now a $700 billion company. So if the question is, hey, it feels kind of crazy and everything's just going up and up and up, and it's like we're never stopping, we're never getting a dip, is this realistic? Is this not? How do we, navigate what's happening right here? I think the number one thing, I think there's two kind of core layers to this. The number one thing to ask yourself first is, do you think we are early to this AI build out, or do you think we're late stage? And I'm still trying to fully understand, and wrap my mind around everything. But my default is more early than not. I don't understand if agentic inference and CPU growth is going to only grow faster and faster and faster. Every research report that I read is that, most people still don't even use AI. Most enterprises still don't even use AI. So if we're talking about that level of growth, if we're talking about Palantir accelerating from 85% to 100%, the only reason they can do that is because companies are willing to pay for more cloud computing for AI workloads, and then obviously more software products on top of that to run their AI applications. It is really hard to say we are super late stage. Having said that, the parabolic nature of the charts makes it really freaking hard, obviously, to be like, yeah, I'm going to buy SanDisk at $1,500 and I'm going to go to sleep at night without worrying about what's happening, versus buying Meta, which is one of the biggest quality companies in the world, at $600, which trades at 18 times forward PE. It's just the mental resilience to deal with the fact that Meta is not cared about, but SanDisk is I think the tough part between how the markets are navigating what's happening. When you see a HUD 8 that goes up 30% in the pre-market because they announced a data center deal that has nothing close to the profitability or profile of quality of a company as a Meta or a Microsoft, but that is the name that is getting the bid. Once again, it makes people wonder what the hell is happening. But you also can't get net bearish because you're like, wait a second, there's a good reason for HUD 8 to get the bid because they just signed a massive data center deal. So it's like this back and forth stuff that you have to go to try to analyze. And then I saw this video last night, which, this is the type of stuff you see when you start getting a little worried about how crazy the rally is becoming. But it is what it is. This is a guy called Mizkif who streams around pop culture, very popular Kick and Twitch streamer. He does not ever stream about the stock market or talk about stocks. This is what he did going into AMD earnings to an audience that literally does not care about the stock market.
Large? 30K? I think we could do 30K. 30K? All right, so we're going to click buy. All right. So now we're going to click buy, and we could do a limit. So right now it's trading at $378.31. So you guys are voting if we should buy or skip on AMD. Wait, this is cool, dude. Solutions. Nice job with this shit, bro. You're in. We did it. Hey, good shit, chat. You're in your first trade. Congrats. Whoa, you're already up. You're already up. Look at that. $900. You're already up. Oh, you're up $1,000 already. Hey, look at that. Look at.
This is not a stock market streamer. So the fact that pop culture streamers are now getting into the market and interacting with their chat and buying AMD before earnings, it's one of those things that makes you question what's happening, in terms of how stocks are becoming that mainstream. But it is happening. And I don't think that's a reason to say it's a top. It obviously is a reason why people feel uncomfortable. But if these companies keep putting up the earnings that they're putting up, maybe more and more people get excited about these results. Lisa Su, she's live right now.
It's really an exciting time for AI. And I think I've been on this program a few times, Jim, and I've told you guys that we are at the very early innings of AI. And you always ask me, like, what does that mean? What does early innings mean? And I think what we can say now for sure is we are seeing that inflection point in the market where, large enterprises are really starting to benefit that AI can really bring to their businesses. And you're seeing the adoption rate really increase. And what that means is you need a lot of compute. And we're always very excited to be here to talk about our accelerator roadmap and the large market that's available there. But what we're also seeing is that you need a lot of CPU compute, which is really the place where we have such a strong portfolio. So you've heard about agents. I can say agents are really driving tremendous demand in the overall AI adoption cycle. And we're very excited to be in the middle of it.
Well, let's talk about the cycle, because one of the things that happened that you mentioned is that we had thought the CPU to GPU ratio 1 to 4, 1 to 8 is closer 1 to 1. Can you tell people what that means in terms of the sheer number of CPUs that we need now when we have agents and we have the data center?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Jim, think about it this way. When we're using AI, every time we use AI, we're asking it questions and it's returning answers for us. But now, with the power of the new models, we can actually have these agents where each of us could have, 2 or 3 or even 5 or 10 agents. And those agents are doing work on behalf of, all of our employees and each of us. And what that means is you need more CPU compute as well, which is the general purpose processing around that. So, you mentioned we are always watching this market. We're constantly talking to our customers, constantly looking at new workloads. And as recently as last year, in November, we thought the CPU TAM was going to be, let's call it, growing at about 18 to 20%, which, by the way, was a much higher number than people previously thought. And now what we're seeing is, we think that rate is doubling, and we're seeing that the CPU market may be over $120 billion by the time we get to 2030, growing at over 35%. And it just tells you how much AI is actually doing. So from my standpoint, I think it's really a validation of everything that we believed. But what's happening is the usefulness, the utility of AI is actually increasing at even a faster pace than we originally thought 6 months ago.
Well, before I turn it over to my colleagues, because those numbers are just astounding, is there enough capacity? I look at Taiwan Semi and how much and how much 3 nano they've got, and I am concerned that perhaps there isn't enough for you, and you're up to 41% of the market against Intel, but much bigger margins. Is there enough capacity for you?
Well, the great news about this, Jim, is we have been planning for this cycle. We have always believed that when AI adoption really explodes, that you would need all kinds of compute, CPUs, GPUs, other accelerators, ASICs. We have that complete portfolio. And we've been working with all of our supply chain partners, including TSMC, including our back-end capacity, including now we're spending a lot of time with data center operators to ensure that they have the power ready for all of these huge deployments. So the main thing we can say is, yes, it's tight for sure. That when we look at it, there's a lot of demand out there, but we have a world-class supply chain that has been building for this moment. So we're very, very much focused on ensuring that our largest customers, who are all the largest hyperscalers in the world, as well as the top enterprises, are getting the compute that they need to accomplish their AI objectives.
So, Lisa, I'd love to go back to sort of this incredible increase in TAM. You just give us more specifics as possible. What changed in sort of the customer conversations? Was there any moment sort of that made you say, wait a second, we're way off here in terms of what we think things are going to, how much they're going to need? Yeah,
David, it's a great point. We have been watching the development of the CPU market continuing to increase. Certainly last year, we've talked about, seeing the increase in the CPU market TAM. I think it's really been over the last 90 days, David, where we've talked to every major hyperscaler and every customer is talking about not only what they need in 26, because frankly, 26 is very much already in progress, but we're now talking about long-term, what do they need in 2027? What do they need in 2028? We're talking about just how much CPU do you need compared to the accelerator. And the main thing that I can say is that we are seeing a shifting of the workload. That's what gives me confidence, because whenever you look at these cycles, you never want to think about, hey, are we just doing catch-up demand? Because catch-up demand is nice, but it's much, much better when you see durable long-term workloads that are just requiring a different amount of compute. And that's what we're seeing today. And I've gotten a lot of conviction in that over the last 90 days, both spending time with our largest customers, as well as just our own experience and what we're seeing in operating with AI. There's just a broad set of workloads that you need to satisfy in order to really get the benefit of the AI capabilities.
Yeah, speaking of one of your largest customers, this Meta deal up to 6 gigawatts, multiple GPU generations. I mean, the numbers are just, they're hard to conceive of to a certain extent. How much of your H2 Helios production is spoken of, for example, by Meta or OpenAI alone versus the rest of your pipeline, Lisa?
Well, David, the best way to think about it is we are very, very pleased and honored to have both OpenAI and Meta as very deep partners. They were very early with us with MI455 and Helios. We've been working jointly on co-design, co-engineering. We're right now in the ramp up of it. But the nice thing I can say is there's been tremendous interest in Helios and MI455 overall. We feel like we're in a great competitive position for exactly what the market needs right now in terms of training and inference. So we've had a broad set of customer interest. And I think the main point that I made yesterday was we are actually seeing initial forecasts above what our plans were, which is great. We are absolutely looking forward to broadening the customers that are using AMD in their data center infrastructure. And the interesting thing is customers are now not just talking to us about, hey, deliver me GPUs. They're actually talking about how can you give me the entire system that is required, including CPUs, including networking and all of those pieces. So it really is a broadening of our data center infrastructure play. And when we look at the company today, it is truly being driven by the data center revenue ramp, which is really exciting. This is exactly what we've been planning for.
Lisa, you mentioned hyperscalers and 2027. Street's still wrestling with the notion that hyperscaler free cash flow could drop, 70% maybe next year. Do you think there will be reassuring signs of monetization from them in the course of 26?
Well, Carl, what I will say is maybe just repeat this comment about we are seeing the benefits of AI adoption. Every CEO, large enterprise CEO that I talk to is accelerating their use of AI. Every CEO is seeing the benefits of not just, let's call it near-term benefits of using AI to, let's call it, streamline some of the cost structure, but we're actually seeing long-term benefits, which really come when you change workflows and when you do your development differently and when you develop products differently. So I'm very, very bullish on what AI can do for companies going forward. And with that comes a return on investment, and it feeds on itself. So we've always said as the point would come when you see enterprise adoption increasing. I think we're seeing that here in the beginning of this year.
Let's talk competition. Lisa, if you take an NVLink 72 rack with 72 GPUs from NVIDIA, and you compare that to your MI450 Helios rack, tell me why I should use you and not NVIDIA?
Well, Jim, first of all, let me start with the market is huge. I think you say that all the time. The market is huge. We are very, very comfortable with our competitive position. We're actually excited about where we're differentiated. And everyone has different ways of doing things. In our case, we've been planning for this inference surge all along. And given our architecture, we have significant benefits when you're talking about inference and when you're talking about memory bandwidth and memory capabilities. There are lots of great products out there. I think we are confident that we have both a very, very strong accelerator roadmap as well as a broadening CPU roadmap, which everyone's talking about CPUs these days, which tells you a little bit about where the market is going.
Yeah, well, speaking of, the ratio of GPUs to CPUs in the data center, I think it had been 8-to-1 and 4-to-1. Now I think you're talking, I don't want to put words in your mouth, 1-to-1. What does that mean for how your revenue mix changes over time, Lisa, if that actually ends up being the true ratio?
Yeah, so we are exactly seeing that, David, and it comes from the expansion of these agentic AI workloads that are requiring, think about all of these agents that you're bringing out require a lot of general purpose compute to accomplish the tasks. So yes, we are seeing, a few years ago, you might have seen the ratio in AI between CPUs and GPUs being 1 CPU to 4 to 8 GPUs. And now going forward, we're seeing that increasingly get closer and to the point where it could be 1-to-1, or you could see even more CPUs than GPUs. If you have really efficient agents, that's what they're going to do. And what that means is we're already, let's call it data center infrastructure is already the largest growth driver that we have at AMD. We forecasted long-term that we would be over 35%. CAGR at the company level. I think we feel very confident in those estimates. We see the CPU business growing much faster than even we forecasted 6 months ago. That's a positive. We see very strong customer adoption on our accelerator base. So it's an exciting time. It's a very, very busy time. I think a lot of customers are counting on us, and we intend to deliver to that. But it's an exciting time to really be in the middle of this AI adoption curve.
All right.
You're right. You got to really give Lisa Su the credit. I mean, again, people called it advanced money destroyer for basically 2 years before this thing started to take off. And I mean, I bought some AMD at $208 in the middle of February when it fell from 267 to like 202. I did not expect to double. I think in my retirement account, I bought it like 215 and my brokerage at 208. I did not expect that to double. Like double in a month and a half. Like that is unbelievable. And I thought I was kind of late to the AMD story because it bottomed at 70 a year and a half ago. And I'm like, all right, I'm buying it lower, or I'm buying it higher, but it's lower from its dip. And now it's at 405. People are asking, did the average price targets rise? Yeah. $431 is now your new average price target, which is kind of funny because all the analysts are like, yeah, it should be above 400, 410 the day after it passes 400, 410, right? You had Bernstein yesterday, Stacy, who was being a little mean on the call, in my opinion. He was like laughing when Lisa Su couldn't give him a proper answer. He was just kind of being like a bit aggressive. And he was asking about China, which in my opinion wasn't even that relevant. But he had them at a $265 price. He upgraded them today to $520. So you're seeing the institutional analysts completely change their tone on AMD, which is also part of the reason that it's pumping. And you've obviously got Lisa Su making this argument around CPUs over GPUs, which is getting the market to be very excited. 408.90 on AMD. Let me know in the chat if you're heavy on AMD. I am not super heavy on AMD, so I am letting it ride. I kind of want to sell because I'm like, okay, it's a double in about a month and a half, but it's also not even a position where, it would hurt the portfolio if I buy more or sell it here, or that I can't sleep at night with, right? So from my opinion, it's just let it ride and let the party continue. But for people that have this thing as 40, 50, 60% of your portfolio, which I know a lot of you do, this is one of the biggest retail stocks. I am curious, what are you doing today? If you bought this thing at $100, what are you doing with AMD at 409, up 15% on the day? And do you kind of let this end up playing out? Now, we got 2 pieces of news before we get into the market open. Iranian state media says Iran has rejected the proposal from the U.S. that got oil to go down this morning. By the way, it looks like people bought $700 million of oil shorts right before that was announced by Axios. Someone continues to get this news before it ends up happening. And maybe their name starts with a B in this situation. A lot of people saying, hold, all right, the diamond hands coming out for AMD. Iran state media says that U.S. media claims about a deal between Iran and the U.S. are meant to explain Trump's recent backtracking on his aggressive move in the Hormuz Strait. Iran says the threats towards Iran are unhelpful and may aggravate U.S. relations. Iran has not yet responded to the latest U.S. proposal, which contains some unacceptable provisions. So Trump stopping Project Freedom, which happened last night, and today announcing he's getting rid of the blockade. From his perspective, the way for him to justify that without seeming like he's weak is by saying Iran has accepted the deal. The Iranians, from their perspective, to make it seem like they're not weak, are accusing Trump of only saying we accepted the deal as a justification for him to get rid of the blockade because he's losing leverage, and that's why he ended up saying what he said. At the end of the day, if both sides eventually want to get a deal, then hopefully they're back and forth and their posturing is whatever political maneuvers they have to engage in. But at the end of the day, if we end up getting a deal, OSS right there up 15%, ASML up 4%, AMD up 15%, then, hopefully we end up getting that deal. Oil, 96. It was at 90. So whoever went short oil right before that Axios article came out, they made a killing on this. But oil is now back up 7%. Still down 4% on the day, but it was down 11%. So you're seeing oil still creeping up a little bit, and we'll see if that affects the broader market. S&P, we hit all-time highs pre-market, 730. Let's see if we sustain it. And I think all eyes on the open are on AMD. Can we get this thing to continue moving higher, or do people take some profits? I'm seeing mostly everyone. I mean, there's probably 90% of people saying we're holding. So if that's how the street feels as well, then hopefully we see this momentum continue. Wednesday, May 6th, 9:30 a.m. Thank you, everybody, for being here. AMD opens at $407. The stock market is now open. All right, wake your asses up. Let's get into it. AMD 409 is what you've got on the open. 409. It got to 430 in the pre-market. So let's see where that goes or how that continues to make a move right here, but you are seeing some more of that momentum on a AMD right there. Opens up at $409, 406 right now. ASML 1500, that's green. Meta continues to go down, that's red. Microsoft continues to go down, that's red. IGV continues to go down, that is red. Down 1%. Palantir, because the software is down, that's down 2%. Poet, which was at 1030 in the pre-market, that is now at 933. Nvidia loses 200. Google loses 396. Amazon goes red. Qualcomm up 4. It was at 200 though. That's down. ASTS is up because Rakuten, I believe, is done selling. That was part of the reason why they kept falling every day. But ASTS starting to get a little bit of a rebound. SPY 728, that's slightly green. HUT up 21%. It was up 30%. Oscar had a massive earnings. We'll talk about them in a second. That's up 8%. So very good for Oscar getting a bit more of that love. GLW, NVIDIA is investing in them along with partnering with them, 16%. This was up a lot more though. So some of these names that were up a lot in the pre-market, they are not getting sold off, but definitely there's some people taking their profits from the pre-market, and so they're opening green, but just not as green. Micron was at 680, Micron at 650. SoFi actually a little bit more green from the pre-market. Intel was at 115, Intel now at 109. Centrus Energy had a good earnings yesterday. That is down. Grab gets a move, 6%, 390 on Grab. That is going a bit green. AMD 415. AMD was at 407 on the open, 415. So the sell-off not really affecting AMD, at least from the pre-market, still down a bit, but holding on. Netflix still below 90. OSS absolutely demolished earnings, 23%. They deserve it. They deserve it. Oscar, OSS, these two companies just had a massive, massive print against expectations. So I would imagine the street would reward them, especially OSS and that Edge AI theme. APLD 4118. And once again, software cannot catch a bid. Jensen, oh my goodness, service now below 89. Jensen went on to ServiceNow's event yesterday, and still he was not able to get the stock to pump. He said as many good things as he could possibly say with Bill McDermott. Street does not care. Uber's up 6%. Disney's up 6.95%. S&P is at 728.95. That still is green. SMCI, which increased their gross margins, that's at 32, up 18.5%. As that also continues to go green. Israeli source tells media Israel was unaware that Trump was close to a deal with Iran. Israel was preparing for escalation in the war. That kind of might be another reason why Trump ended up announcing what he did today, this morning. If he thought Israel was going to prepare for an escalation, maybe he wanted to calm things down before that could happen. But that is from an Israeli source to Bloomberg on the morning's news around this war. NVIDIA back to 200, 271. It was at 202. Palantir just getting wrecked here. Again, I do not think it's Palantir's fault. I think, I said this to someone yesterday. I really, really do believe in this. The liquidity has to come from somewhere. And for the liquidity to come to buy up Micron and all these other companies, you need to sell something. And it seems like fund managers are just selling their losers, which in this case is software, and they are buying up semis. Now, maybe that rotation is gonna happen to the opposite in some respects over the coming weeks and months. But as of now, that rotation is very much in effect, and it's quite obvious to see how it's playing out. Marvell right there, 173. CoreWeave, 136. Wow. CoreWeave going green. Nebius, 180. IREN, which has earnings tomorrow, 58. Thank you, IREN. Getting some love. Let's see if Daniel can give us a deal right here, 7%. Again, at 40, I think it was just hated way too much. They've announced a couple acquisitions. If they can get another hyperscaler deal, maybe this thing really makes a move. ServiceNow still down 89, Grab at 391, Corning 19%, and then AMD 426. It's making its move. It is absolutely making its move right here. Now the question is, how large can this move become in respect to where it was last night? 432 is what you got to beat. SoFi up 3%. That is still green, 1649. Micron still up 2. SanDisk still holding 1400. Western Digital also about to go red, down from 484. So some of the memory names, I guess you could say, taking a bit of a breather today. SK Hynix was up 11% yesterday. EWI South Korea, that's up 3.68%. And then ASTS getting a much needed move after some of the institutional selling has been done. 68.68 on 7.34%. This was a quote from JP Morgan's desk this morning, their trading desk. Intel alone is contributing to around 200 basis points to the S&P 500 performance, which is nearly 1/3 of the entire year-to-date return, aka 2% of the 6% return year-to-date. Micron is contributing to another 1.5%. So Intel and Micron are contributing to 350 basis points, or 3.5% of the S&P 500 move this year, which is basically half of it. So then the JP Morgan equity desk says, so the real question is, when do mutual fund managers finally throw in the towel and start buying? So you've got the institutional research heads coming out this morning saying, hey, if this is what's contributing to the S&P 500 growth, which the bears will say that's horrible, that 50% of the growth is two companies, but the bulls will say, well, those are the two companies that are pioneering this AI revolution. When do people throw in the towel and just start buying them? And I think with AMD, you're seeing that today. The average analyst price target is up to 431. AMD's at 423. I mean, that's probably going to get upgraded closer to 500 towards the coming months if this continues. And same thing for Intel. TSM, is that making a move? TSM 409. That's also making a move. 4%. That is also green. Micron lost 650. Micron did lose 650. Still $9 away from going red on the day, so it would have to lose 640 for it to go red. But still green. Applied Digital, that is also up 4%. And again, HUT is up 34. HUT is up 34. Landband says taking profits on AMD. And then someone here says, I'm buying more of AMD. So again, I mean, put in the chat, are you buying more or are you selling at these levels? And, you know, I've had a couple people reach out to me saying, I am selling my AI and I'm buying ServiceNow. I'm selling my AI and I'm buying Adobe. Like, there's a few people that reached out last night saying, look, I've made a lot of money on Micron, but I can't handle it anymore. And I need to be into something safer, which I get. It's just that hasn't been the trade. The trade this year has been to stick with your winners and let them ride out if this AI revolution once again continues to be more parabolic and exponential than we can assume. And, you know, if you trimmed at 400, 500, even at 600, it wasn't the right move. So I wonder, trimming at 650, is that the right move, right? Like, because, you know, one could argue that's the logical move. ServiceNow's beaten up. Micron's up 6%. ServiceNow's a great company, more sustainable, less cyclical than Micron. It's time to pivot. But it's also like, is that the money-making move here? Because obviously throughout the year, the money-making move has not been to sell your SanDisk to buy Meta. Seeing more people say hold. Jabber says I sold all of it. Robert says not doing anything. A couple people saying buy. The memory names getting a little bit of a haircut now. SanDisk going red. That is down. Micron is very close to red, but not red yet. Western Digital also going red. 463. So some of the memory names taking a breather, which I don't think anyone would think is crazy. But they are indeed. A-Lab, that one had a good earnings. That's down. Arista also had a good earnings, but yeah, 11%. I did not dive deep into why they fell, but they got hit pretty hard. And they didn't end up recovering from it. And I was surprised by it. Now, again, it's been a relatively decent year for them, but they did beat on the top and the bottom. Looks like guidance probably just wasn't the best. SMCI, 17%. SMCI, again, got hit pretty hard. It was at $120, went down to 19 after the China GPU smuggling stuff. So any good news would be good for them. They did $10 billion in revenue. Their market cap yesterday was $16 billion. So they're doing 3 times the amount of revenue as their market cap. And if you think any good news would not be priced in, then there was your pump on SMCI. Nebius 181. 181. Is Meta below 600? Meta is below 600. It's pretty unbelievable when Google is pushing 400 and Meta's below 600. You know, a lot of people saying Meta is Google in 2025. A lot of people saying Meta is nowhere near Google in 2025. So there's obviously two sides that are making the market right here in the context of Meta. Google, though, that $200 billion deal with Anthropic, obviously getting them a lot of excitement now. Again, you've got a lot of people to show both sides questioning this $200 billion deal. Yeah, this chart right here, half of the cloud backlog at Microsoft, Oracle, Google, and Amazon is 2 companies, OpenAI and Anthropic. So Google investing in Anthropic and then Anthropic investing that money back into Google chips. You got a lot of people thinking, is this even real RPO? Now, once again, if that investment that they're making into these chips is going to lead them to get more revenues and more customers long-term and grow more exponentially, then it's not as circular as people may think. But, those are some of the qualms, I guess, about how those deals are announced. AMD 422, still green. ASTS getting some love. 70, back to 70. Rocket Lab also up 2.68%. There was some space news this morning, particularly around ETFs. So SpaceX will be going public soon, in probably about a month and a half. The update on space right here is that there are multiple new ETFs that are basically being filed. Yeah, so there are 8 ETFs that are coming out soon. Bloomberg Space Economy ETF, Wisdom Tree Space ETF, VistaShare Space Super Cycles ETF. All of them will be going public in about 30 days. They were filed about a month and a half ago. SanDisk continues to go red, even though it captured 1,400. So maybe all those ETFs are going to buy up a bunch of SpaceX when it goes public, and that's going to be their way to attract new inflows, just like DRAM bought up all the memory names before they ran crazy over the past month. DRAM up 3%. And that might be the way that an ASTS or a Rocket Lab continue to get a bid. Also, I'm assuming the ETFs would buy a bunch of ASTS, Rocket Lab, Lunar, Planet Labs, et cetera. NVIDIA 4.87 trillion, Google 4.79. So Google needs about $2 more to break NVIDIA, and NVIDIA needs to fall basically $1. And then Google will officially be the largest company on the planet versus from last night. Tanner says, do I dare post an NVIDIA or AMD video? Maybe bad timing. Well, look, I don't think anyone can deny now AMD's PE at 159 on the trailing 12 months. A little bit more expensive than NVIDIA's at 40. But I don't think that even matters right now. The price action's showing you it doesn't matter, but also this narrative around CPU demand, even if NVIDIA's, baked that into kind of their forecast, if AMD and Intel are the leaders there, and again, AMD is 690 billion, NVIDIA's at 5 trillion. So you would imagine it's just easier for an AMD to go up over an NVIDIA. Investors want alpha. And if I think that's the other thing we don't talk about. A lot of people just feel like there's no more alpha in NVIDIA, which again, you could disagree with that claim. That's fair. But if people are just not thinking that, then that's affecting the stock. Wow, Reddit getting hit today as well. It was at 177 yesterday, down to 167. I wonder if Meta's bringing that one down. OSS, again, monster earnings, 13%. Wow. Or sorry, $13, 36%. $330 million market cap now. Street really loved those numbers as it's catching a bid. Caterpillar 919, GameStop 2424. That is flat. And Cloudflare is also 1.27%, but again, AMD continues to be the story. 423 as that's green. Where is Palantir? Are we below 130? We're holding on to 133.50. Yeah, it is. I can understand how annoying it may be to see a Palantir have blockbuster earnings or a ServiceNow have a fantastic earnings or a Meta to have crazy earnings and for those stocks to be down. But then again, you can either complain about it or, look at how the market's thinking of this stuff. And right now the market is obviously just not indulged with caring about software. And I feel like that's okay because that is where the alpha is created, right? When the market hated AMD, the alpha was if you love AMD or you understand the AMD thesis way better than the market, you bought it and you have a phenomenal cost basis. And now the market's literally FOMOing into AMD. I mean, this is not retail FOMOing into AMD, right? This is all institutions realizing they completely missed what the story could be like. And they're buying in. Maybe that happens with software. In fact, I think that probably does happen with software. Maybe not this year, but I just don't see these software companies fundamentally being stuck at their levels. Now, Dario didn't help yesterday when he talked about software officially being dead. I mean, I think his quote was like, some companies will survive, but software as an industry, no, he said software as an industry will survive, but some companies will go bust. And he was nice enough not to name the companies, but he was probably implying the Salesforce or ServiceNows, maybe even the Palantirs, if he just doesn't think these companies will be relevant, no matter how much growth they're putting up, because he's growing 8,000% faster, then that is what the market is also kind of taking a bit more seriously. SPY 729. Big Bear AI, they missed on EPS pretty badly. That's up 2.5. I didn't go through the entire earnings, but Not a crazy move right here. They did have a miss and a beat on EPS and revenue. Stock's relatively flat. AMD still up. Amcor 77. AMD 429. So 432 is your pre-market high. Let's see if it breaks that. And again, there you go, 430. To magnify or to quantify how crazy the magnitude of this move has been, it was at 350 last night when it fell 4% on the earnings. So from 350 to 430 is the print that we're seeing, which is just, I mean, you don't have the words. It's just unbelievable. And it's pretty incredible to see it. Big Bear AI didn't even take questions. Yeah, they never take questions. So that's not a surprise. But it's also part of the reason I've never really loved them. You know, you got to at least talk to your shareholders a bit more. ASML 1517, that's up. Uber 77. AMD duplicates your money in 30. Yeah, advanced money duplicator. Literally, in my case, what, 50 days it took to duplicate? Like, goodness. I also think eventually people feel NVIDIA will get the breakout. It's just, I don't know, dude. It is NVIDIA, Meta, Microsoft. This is the other reason I think a lot of people are saying, is it euphoric? Because fundamental companies getting completely disrespected over data center companies that aren't even profitable and have to constantly dilute, catching a massive bid. It's not to say those companies shouldn't catch a bid, but the liquidity for those stocks are coming from the big guys. You could say it's coming from the sidelines, but you know, more often than not, that sideline money tends to come into the big guys. I don't think, you know, someone who's sitting on a lot of money and has made their money and wants to be relatively safe is going to be like, let me just YOLO on a data center stock. Maybe they are, but they tend to, you know, do the large cap names when they start to feel more bullish again. And that is not happening here. Or if it is happening, it's isolated to a couple large cap names. It does feel like the fund managers, the active hedge funds, are rotating in and out of these positions, and the source of liquidity are the large caps and software names. Oracle also down about 1% on the day. Google has not crossed 400 yet. We're waiting to see if it happens. 397. Tried to get there close last night, but it didn't do that. I think the market is just waiting on their earnings, but Meta already had earnings, right? ServiceNow already had earnings. Microsoft already had earnings. And yeah, the earnings weren't, you know, Intel type of earnings, but I mean, for the size of those companies to put up their numbers and to not get a single bid. Now, TMDX, they had earnings and their earnings were actually bad. Operating expenses went up by like 50% year over year. That's why that stock's down 20%. Margins also came down. So if the market doesn't care about Meta, they definitely don't care about organ transplants. OSS 14. Wow. Unbelievable move right there. 44 freaking percent on the day. You know, I got in at 990 and it had already pumped from $4 to $9. So I got in end of January. I guess 990 still a decent entry given the earnings. $14 right there. Even if it closes above 1250 today, I would be happy. Why is Oracle down today? Some days Oracle is seen as a data center stock. Some days Oracle is seen as a software stock. Oracle's in a very unique position. It gets all the love and then all the hate on random days. There's no way the big guys can be this dumb FOMOing. Well, first of all, the premise of your question assumes that they are FOMOing in a dumb way, aka that buying AMD at 422, for example, is dumb because this thing is obviously going to pull back. I think maybe the big guys would push back and say, nope, this is NVIDIA 2023, and NVIDIA 2023, you just had to buy, you had to literally just close your eyes and buy it, even though the multiple in 2023 was egregious on NVIDIA. That's why everyone was shorting it, because they didn't think that growth was sustainable, and NVIDIA proved them wrong every single quarter since then. AMD didn't have that type of quarter, but if they're going to have that type of quarter or the type of years of quarters because of CPU demand, that's why the big guys would say it's not FOMO. Having said that, if they're not going to be able to execute at that level, yeah, the big guys might be getting it wrong by putting in this much money this quick. But I really don't think this is retail that's pumping it $100 billion today. I think those are institutional flows, and they're probably selling software to get the money to get there. Broadcom 428. By the way, a lot of people have been asking, again, that question, is it a bubble? This was some good research that I found from the institutional desk this morning. This is their definition of an official bubble. 2-year price return of 100%, 2-year excess versus the S&P 500 return of 100%, and a 5-year return of in excess of 50%. The only sector that is doing that right now is SMH, the semis. So those are your three kind of frameworks to establish if something is officially a bubble. As per some of this institutional research, the semis match that category right now. And this is the chart overlaying the dot-com bubble. So if you think those three metrics are relevant to call a top, then I mean, all the signs are there. But if you think Intel and AMD and ARM and NVIDIA, once again, will just completely demolish every single quarter for the next coming years, and the CapEx will only keep going up, it's just hard to be the person who calls a top right here. Michael Burry added to his semiconductor puts yesterday. Strike is 330 for January 2027. So he thinks this is going to collapse probably in the summer or in the fall. The market's going to be the judge of that. But as of now, we are seeing this momentum continue. Apple 284. Apple 284 as that continues to go green. Yeah, that's also true. Howard Marks even said yesterday that it's not a bubble. And Howard Marks literally built his career on calling bubbles. And he's been right many times on bubbles, which is why, he's done very well in fixed income because he's avoided a lot of the stock market drawdown. But even him yesterday, he was like, well, AI could be so explosive that you can't say this is necessarily a bubble. Qualcomm, that's up 4%. That is up 4%. What is the company that moved from shoes to AI? That was Bird. Their stock is getting a 16-cent move today, 2.8%. The valuation of the top two semiconductor companies are reasonable, super high margins, and low debt. That's the other thing that I think the bears that are screaming bubble forget. Dot-com peak, Intel and Microsoft and Cisco were trading at well over 80 to 100 times earnings. NVIDIA is at 25 times forward, and TSM is at 27 times forward. It's just, there's euphoria, but there's not euphoria in the biggest companies on the planet. So, if those are the ones that are going to collapse the market, if they have a massive drawdown like Burry is predicting, but their valuation would get too cheap if they fell 10% and people would buy, which is exactly what happened in March. NVIDIA got to 160, AMD got to 195. Even Meta got to 520, right? There's too much dip buying action that's there. Also, I think the thing that the dot-com bubble comparisons forget to compare to as well is, as Microsoft tries to go green, we did not have a buy the dip generation in 2000. We had a lot of people that were new to the stock market, opening up their E-Trade accounts. But for the past 5 years since COVID, 6 years, retail has been trained to buy the dip. And retail has been rewarded for buying the dip. It's not that complicated. If retail thinks that's a strategy, and literally that has been the strategy that works, then, it kind of changed in March as people got worried about the Iran war. But at the end of the day, if you stick to the strategy, it paid off. So if you do get a nasty 10% dip from here and Nebius goes to 120, I feel like people would think that's a massive opportunity. Same thing with the SanDisk goes back down to 800. Massive opportunity, I think, would be flashing for people, unless there's a thesis breaker. But if there's not a thesis breaker, if it's just a general dip, I think people come in. Someone please buy the Palantir dip. Palantir 133.50. Buy the dip was definitely a thing in 2020 and before. Well, the thing is, 2020 inspired an entire generation of investors that for the past 6 years have been growing their accounts. You could call it the Robinhood generation. And also people that have grown up and started to make more money. I'm making more money today at 28 years old than I was at 22 years old in 2020. So I have more money to allocate. And now that I know about the markets and there's plenty of people like me, their extra income goes into the stock market. So there's just more liquidity that's available, which means dips are easier to get bought as well. AMD, a little bit of a dip from 430 to 419, but still holding its 17% move. NVIDIA, thank you, NVIDIA, coming back to the party. 203.60. Up a little bit on the day. It was at 218 a couple weeks ago. Not even a couple weeks ago, last week, before it ended up falling. Jacob, thanks for the super chat. Greetings from Norway. Love your streams, mate. Is it crazy to buy grab calls here? How long would you go out? I will say the grab call volume is 1.8 million calls versus 200,000 puts. So there are definitely a lot of calls that are being purchased on it. However, I don't know, man. I feel like it's more comfortable buying calls on an AI semiconductor name versus calls on a Hood or a SoFi or a Grab or a Rocket Lab. Now, again, this is where you would buy calls, where the thing has been beaten up so much that it feels like, it has bottomed, versus a name that's, run like crazy. But I don't know if this parabolic momentum around the sentiment around AI semiconductor and supply chain names continues for the coming year/years. That doesn't mean the growth doesn't continue. That doesn't mean their stocks don't do well. But right now we are seeing like 3-4% every day. I wonder when that stops or if that doesn't stop. And if that doesn't, for a while, calls have extrinsic value of time, which is hard, because if you get to the expiration and your strike is not there, then you lose your money. So I think if that happens, the liquidity will come from a lot of these companies and go into the AI names, which is why buying shares might be a more reasonable thing to do right here. ASTS 69.29. So do I think some of these names are crazy undervalued, like a Zeta? It's growing freaking 50% and getting dumped? Yeah, which is the right time to buy calls. But if the software sentiment or fintech sentiment continues to exist, which we can't ignore, right? Because how many people thought like the software stuff would be over? It's been 4 months. The software sentiment is not gone. Like it started at end of January. February got a little aggressive when Anthropic started. Then, March it cooled down a little bit. April, we got the rebound. And then after April 13th, which was kind of like Armageddon for all the SaaS names, we're back to May 6th, a month later, and it's not over. People are still questioning the terminal value of software. And maybe it concludes when OpenAI and Anthropic finally go public. But that is the timing issue that I think we're having right now. NVIDIA 204. She woke up a little bit today, which is nice. But AMD obviously still making a massive move. A minute Palantir doubles their EPS next year and beats the 100% growth that Karp is estimating on a 4 PE basis. It becomes reasonable. Thoughts? It has to happen not just next year, but for multiple years. But yes, if you assume the durability of their growth at the level that Karp is describing it. I mean, look, again, ServiceNow says they're going to do 30 billion in revenue by 2030. Karp says we're going to do 15 billion by 2027. If Karp gets to 25 billion by 2028, 2029, I mean, he's going to catch up to ServiceNow, and ServiceNow is a much, much larger company in terms of the revenue that they do. So that rate of growth, if you believe in that, which I don't think Palantir has given you any reason to not believe in that, yeah, then the PE starts to become a lot more reasonable than what it has been for the past couple of years. But again, the street doesn't care. I don't think the street's selling off Palantir because of its multiple. I don't think the street sold off Shopify 17% yesterday. It's barely up today, up 20 cents because of its multiple. Because these stocks have had high multiples for a long time. Like, I don't think people woke up and were like, Shopify, Palantir, ServiceNow, those are all expensive names. I genuinely think the liquidity to buy an AMD or a Micron has to come from somewhere. And portfolio managers are not that emotional. They're like, oh, this is not working. Cool. Let's go into what's working and let's get rid of what's not working. And that's where the sell-off ends up happening. Rock Lab, 80.61. 80.61. Is that still as green? Snapchat is down. Snapchat is down. AMD losing some of its love, but I don't think anyone can be too upset given it's at 400. Gold is up 3%. What do you think about Snap at these levels? Look, if there was any time for Snap to do a turnaround, it would be now, but it's hard to trust Evan Spiegel when you look at the internal finances of the company, when you look at the stock-based comp. Like, the financials look disgusting. Now, they started layoffs, which is getting them on the right track to at least start cutting back on some of their costs. But if you're buying it for an ads play, Meta and Reddit probably feel more sustainable. Also, Reddit's going 70%. Meta's going 30%. Snapchat's going like what? 10% maybe? So the core business can Evan Spiegel get that back to growth. SanDisk again goes red. Lutnick is testifying today about Epstein. I don't know if that's going to be live, but he is doing that today. Do you think gold will go back above 5,000? Gold is at 4,700. Silver's at 77. I don't know, because Bitcoin's waking up again. And that also is something that's taking liquidity from the global commodities, or could take liquidity. So, I mean, maybe if we think inflation's really going to spike up again, gold would be the play, but the 10-year's down, oil's down. If those fears kind of calm down, 10-year 4.36 today, maybe we go more risk on. Yeah, maybe crypto winter. I would say, okay, what price does Bitcoin need to get to for people to feel crypto winter is over? OSS continuing its pump, 45%. I feel like Bitcoin needs to establish a legit 100,000 print for people to feel confident that crypto winter is over. Because if it chills around 80,000 for the same amount of time it's chilled around 70,000, that to me is, we're still in crypto winter. It's not ugly, but it's also not like out of the winter. Okay, everyone's saying 100. Cool. That was my thoughts. 100K. Like, I feel like you can't get that bullish before 100K. Coinbase has launched gold and silver perpetual futures for non-US traders. All right, you're seeing a lot more of these perps come to market as more and more companies introduce different forms of leverage here, hyperliquid being one of the biggest ones that is out there. Someone just bought, well, not someone, but an aggregate call flow on AMD in the first 15 minutes of the market open, $39 million. $40 million of call flow on AMD right as the market opened. I sold 20% of my AMD yesterday, so I had to sell another 20% now after this pump because it became a bigger position than NVIDIA and Broadcom. Wow. Dude, am I being wrong? I feel like, look, at the end of the day, I also think retail has to feel okay with, Brad Gerson said this the other day, it's okay to take profits. It's okay to so it's like, when you, like, am I doing the wrong thing by selling something I'm massively up on because it's becoming XYZ percentage of my portfolio? It's like, it's such a privileged question to ask, right? Like, we have to back up and be like, hey, we're making a lot of money here. It's okay for us to not make that much more, even if you miss out on some gains. Shopify going red again. So I don't know if that's the wrong thing to do here, because what if AMD, is really headed on a track to 600 way quicker before NVIDIA's headed on a track to 250? But gains are gains, and sleeping well at night also is a hack to healthy living. Tanner knows all about that. So if AMD's gotten so big where you can't sleep at night, it is okay, I think, to take some gains right there. Google 393. 393. Shopify again getting wrecked right here. Oracle trying to flip green. Coherent does have Lumentum had a great earnings, like phenomenal earnings. They beat on the guide, they beat on EPS, they beat on adjusted EBITDA. Very important company when it comes to photonics and optics, which again, Goldman put out some good institutional research the other day, said optics is going to be a bigger market than even memory in terms of the rate of growth over the next 10 years, as it is one of the central components for these chips. But Lumentum was also up 100% going into the print. So a 5% drawdown, I don't think should be seen as that aggressive. Coherent 338, that's up. UNH got a candle 1% up. Nokia, which announced a partnership with Lockheed yesterday and Anduril. Nokia right there basically flat, but it was green. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu is in talks with U.S. officials to understand the latest Iran negotiations amid concerns over possible U.S. concessions. Israel is particularly wary of sanctions relief and is pushing for limits on Iran's missile program and proxy forces while preserving Israel's operational freedom. So I imagine we'll get some more updates today around what's happening with Israel and the potential peace deal that Trump said is potentially on the way to be signed. Like, we need to get a lot more details on if that's happening. By the way, SpaceX submitted plans for its first fab, and the initial investment is reported to be $55 billion. If fully expanded, total spending could reach as much as $119 billion. This was a notice that they put out this morning. I think a lot of people are questioning if this is enough investment that they're putting into their fabs, given the extent of amount of money or amount of compute that Elon wants. But as an initial first step, if a lot of that money potentially is also going into Intel as in terms of a collaboration to build that fab, that could obviously be a massively bullish catalyst. The other reason Intel ran yesterday again is Apple is looking to potentially use Intel chips because of their supply shortage. And so you got Apple and SpaceX coming into it right now. OpenAI, we've teamed up with AMD, Broadcom, Intel, Microsoft, and NVIDIA to launch multi-path reliable connections. They should have just named every component in the SMH at that point. Multi-path reliable connections. Okay. Yeah, ASML pumping on this SpaceX Intel news as well. 1516 on ASML. Why do you think Zeta is down? I think software is just not important to the street. IGV down 2%. Where's Adobe? Adobe down 3%. Salesforce down 2%. Atlassian down 7%. This thing was down 70% for the year, pumped 30%, and now still back down 7%. I mean, it's comical, but it's also the nature of this market. The only software name that's green on our list is Oracle because they have a little bit of NeoCloud in them. Everything else, red across the board. Microsoft says they're substantially boosting investment in data centers across Europe. They had a couple announcements around Asia yesterday as well. So you might be seeing more and more of Microsoft data center expansion. Again, the company's spending the CapEx, no bid. The company's getting the CapEx, bid. And I think the other thing the street's trying to figure out, right, is like, okay, Microsoft and Meta are spending all this CapEx, and we're not going to buy them because we're going to buy the companies that are getting the CapEx. But when do we buy the companies that are spending the CapEx and dump the companies that are getting the CapEx when the CapEx eventually ends, right? That has been the sort of existential question of this bull market. Definitely the existential question of if you would buy the Max 7s or if you would just lean into the semiconductor ecosystem. And that question is hard to answer because most estimates say CapEx will go up in 2027 to close to $900 billion. We're at about $700 billion for this year. So if Meta's spending $145 billion this year, if Meta's spending $180 billion next year, or $200 billion, it makes you wonder when the hell is it easy to buy Meta if the street's narrative is going to be, no, let's buy more ASML, let's buy more Micron. That money is going to go into other places. Let's not touch Meta. I feel like Meta would have to literally, in their case, get rid of Reality Labs to show some type of operational efficiency or lower the CapEx. But they're in that prisoner's dilemma where they can't lower the CapEx, right? And, you know, that's another concern in terms of how the market is trying to price these names. Lenny, thank you for the $50 super chat. Really, really appreciate it. Thank you for being here, Lenny McMillan. And thank you. That was very kind for the $50 super chat. Also, Chris Adelman, thank you for the $36 super chat. Appreciate everyone being here and appreciate people being part of the show. Brandon, thank you for the super chat. I'm in 529 covered calls at 410 on AMD. Would you let it cool off right here? Well, it's literally at your strike, 410, and you got 20 days. Yeah, I personally would let it cool off a little bit. See if it cools off. If not, I think that's a pretty easy roll. You know, if AMD even gets to 430, you'll be able to roll out of that. You know, you're not at like a 330, 350 strike. So that one I wouldn't be too worried about. Especially if, you know, we got to see if AMD continues to go parabolic. Got to 430 in the morning. Obviously, you got sellers coming in. Do people buy this dip or do they let it chill out at 412? That'll be the broader question right here. Marvell just went red. Micron, are we red? Micron is very close to being red, 644. Palantir, a little green candle coming in at 134.80. Very little green candle, probably corresponding with IGV. Nokia goes red. Where's BlackBerry? That is also red. BlackBerry got a little bit of hype on Monday. That went down. Okay, so we're seeing a few names start to get some candles up in the software space, but most, Nebius also losing 182. SPY's holding up. Corning, wow, what a decline. Dude, this thing was up 20%. It's now up 9%. So still holding on to something, but Oscar, it was up 10%. Now it's up 1%. Robinhood went red. Qualcomm was up 10%. Now it's up 2%. Amazon goes red. Poet was at 1050. Now it's at, it was at 1095. Now it's at 945. So definitely some sellers as we enter 10 a.m. Bloom Energy was 305. Now it's at 286. VIX is back up. Meta actually getting over. It's so funny. The semis go down. Meta and Microsoft start to catch a bid. Unbelievable, dude. It's like Meta's and Microsoft and the software names are not part of the cool club. And neither is NVIDIA as it gets to 205. Like you got 3 hyperscalers and then the software names and fintech that are not part of the cool boys club. And the only time they get some love is when the other side takes a breather. Even though the other side is only getting all this love because Microsoft, NVIDIA, and Meta are the ones spending all this CapEx. And not to mention the software companies. If ServiceNow and Palantir and Salesforce and Adobe don't adopt all of these agentic workflows, that is a lot less demand for compute, which is a lot less demand for a Micron or an Amcor or an Intel or an AMD. So it is just hilarious that the names that are actually creating the market for these companies are the ones that are getting no love, but the ones that are benefiting from the market that was created from them are getting all the love. And that's also why I think people are, questioning the stability of this rally. But nonetheless, that is how this market is playing out. Intel right there, 109. 109 is that one's going down a little bit. Joby, are we moving on Joby? How many people are long Joby and Archer? Joby just showed off a great event in New York. By the way, shout out to the Knicks, baby. We're going for the ring. Wow, dude, I just went to Google to go get the score on the Knicks game, and I typed in Knicks stock. Because usually I'm so used to typing in a ticker and a stock to get Google to give me the stock price. So I had to type in the Knicks right there. So we got the win. Let's see if we can get the actual Eastern Conference Finals right here. Yeah, Knicks stock. Although I think MSG technically has exposure to the Knicks and MSG is public. I thought the Lakers might have a chance to win it yesterday, dude. It was tied. It was like 25-25. I was like, dude, what if they, and then by the third quarter, I was like, yeah, this is not happening. It's like when you have your stock, right? And it's getting a little bit of a pump, even though it probably shouldn't be pumping. And you're like, oh, what if this is a good day? And then you're like, yeah, it's not going to be a good day. That's basically Palantir and earnings. It's like, oh, 85% growth. Touched 150, should be fine. And then you just see it come down. Meta getting a bid. Meta getting a bid. The metals are pumping a little bit. The rare earths are also up a bit. It's just so funny that Meta is getting the bid right now as the semis go down. Like, it's hilarious. Microsoft getting a bid as the semis go down. Palantir getting a bid as you're either long semis, short software, Microsoft, Meta, NVIDIA, or the opposite. Dave also down 5%. On their numbers. Defin says, amid see you Saturday. Defin, I am so happy. I didn't know you were going to the Chicago meetup. I will again put the link in the chat for anyone who wants to be there. Dude, Defin's been watching the channel for freaking 4 or 5 years now. Awesome, man. I did not know you were coming to the meetup. That is great. Super, super excited. Finally, we'll get to see you in person. Should be fun. Also, I have to call this out. My meetups are usually a top short term to the market. It's happened 2 times at this point. So it would be quite ironic if the meetup ends up being a top again. Now, granted, I don't know if even my meetup can stop this bull market in the short term, 730 on the S&P. But if you're buying calls for Monday of next week or for the end of this month, just remember, wow, CNN founder died. Ted Turner. How old was he? Ted Turner was 87 years old. He has just passed away. Wow, rest in peace to Ted Turner. As he is officially passed. That just came out of nowhere. 87 years old. 87 years old. So short the market before the meetup, yes. I'll leave the link again to the meetup in the chat. Still get your tickets if you want to be there. Again, we don't make any profit off these tickets. This is purely to cover the cost of food, security, the venue. So this is literally just an event to bring people together. There's no margin we make on this, but should be a fun time in Chicago. But yeah, that is crazy, dude. CNN founder Ted Turner. I wonder if he was actually very sick or if this happened randomly. All the money in the world can't buy you more time. That is correct. It's important. I have a very close friend of mine who, he recently got diagnosed with something pretty serious. And yeah, it's one of those things. He called me a couple weeks ago and told me about it. And, it's definitely one of those things that makes you remember, dude, none of this shit matters. Like, if you don't have your health, like, we talk about stocks all the time, and he was like, I don't really care about the stock market right now because the doctors just told me that it's looking pretty ugly right now. So literally just have to cherish every freaking day. 204.65 right here on NVIDIA. 204.65. Was he sick? He was 87. Yeah, let me try to get some coverage on how he passed. I mean, 87 means he might have been potentially sick. The headline is just Ted Turner has passed. There's no explanation for why. I'm on CNN's website as well. What do they have? He had Lewy body dementia, a progressive brain disorder, diagnosed in 2018. In early 2025, he was hospitalized with a mild case of pneumonia before recovering at a rehab. Okay, so yeah, he definitely was sick. And that's what ended up leading to this. TSM right there, 411. Meta and Microsoft, the only reason they're green is because Micron's about to go red. Like, there's no headline I can give you guys for Meta and Microsoft. Maybe IGV getting a little bit of a pump, which it is right now, but that's there. Chat says, I have a friend with Lewy body. Dementia is scary. Yeah, my grandpa back in 2022, my first real experience with death was my grandpa in 2020. He lived with us from end of 2020 to 2022. And he was losing his mind, dementia, Alzheimer's, all that stuff. But he did remember me. Every day I came home from work, he remembered me, and he was really happy when he saw me every day. And I would just sit with him for hours, and literally, even if we sat in silence, he would just be so happy if I sat with him. But he was losing his mind, and I remember when he was hospitalized, I was the only person in our family that was with him when he passed because my dad had to go to work. My uncle couldn't be there, and so that was the first time I saw someone quite literally lose their mind and then end up passing away. And I think he was around 85. But it makes you remember that everything you're doing, try to do it to the best of your ability. Try to live each day, quite frankly, like it is your last, even if your stocks are down, your portfolio is not cooperating, because that inevitable day is waiting for all of us in some way or the other. Which is why financial freedom is so important, right? It's because we want to do so much for our families and our friends, and money at the end of the day is necessary to be able to make some of that stuff happen. But the bigger picture obviously always has to be health. Wow, Meta literally going green as Micron drops 1%. Unfreaking believable that the market says, in my opinion, the rotation is, okay, we'll buy back the company doing the CapEx and we'll sell off the company benefiting from the CapEx. But if we start buying up Micron, then we'll sell off Meta. I feel like that's what's happening. Jose says, sorry to hear that, admit I had something similar with my dad. Yeah, it's tough, man. It's one of those things where I've actually had multiple dreams about my grandpa over the past year. And I think I was the only person he liked talking to be honest. He had an okay relationship with my dad, but they've been through stuff. And so with me, he just really liked being around me. And the one thing I'll never forget about my grandpa is he always gave me a birthday gift. I have a weird relationship with my dad's side of the family when it comes to grandparents. And basically, none of my dad's side of the family ever gave me a birthday present. I know it's super weird, but it's a really weird relationship. It's it's too much to explain, but they never gave me a birthday present. My grandpa, even if he had to hide it, he would find a way to give me a birthday present whenever it was my birthday. And so it was just his way of, even if it was $50 or something, he would find a way to give me a birthday present. So it was one of those things where, he really, really did love me. But it speaks to the idea of when someone is diagnosed with something that bad, you just have to find a way to not only navigate their position, but also recognize that it is part of the reason I think people care so much about AI, because we don't have a solution for a lot of this shit. And if we could come up with a cure for Alzheimer's or dementia, which is not easy to do, but technology could lead it to get there, then investing in those companies helps us also get there. Is it an Indian thing? Yeah, it's more like that. Again, I don't give a shit about the birthday present. I don't care about getting a gift. It was just more so this like sign of appreciation or love, because like at least Indian grandparents, they always want to give you a little something just to show you they love you. And my dad's side of the family, it was just a different relationship, but he always tried. Qualcomm 188.98. That is green. You're seeing the Microns and the SanDisk start to get a hit down. Not really get more love. Can they adopt me because no one gives me shit? SanDisk down 4. All right, your memory stocks are falling today. I wonder how long this lasts. This little memory sell-off we're seeing. Put in the chat, what do we think? Does the memory stuff last for a day, for an hour? OSS still up on the day. AMD getting hit with the other semiconductor names. Or by 12 p.m. is this dip bought up? And do we move on? Keel used to be Bitfarms. That is up 10% on the day. As that continues to go green. This is exactly why I drink. Oh my gosh. What do we think? What do we think people are saying? Ori says we are witnessing a shift from hardware to software. Ori, I don't think you could say that in like 30 minutes of market action. I don't think we can easily just say that. Can we? Can we easily say the first red day of Micron, first green day for a couple of the names that get sold off to buy Micron, that it's a shift? I don't know, dude. I feel like it's too soon. Now, do I think it would be healthy? I think most people, even if you're super long semis, would think it's healthy. Which doesn't mean Micron goes back to 400. It means Micron maybe chills out in the 600s. And some of these other stocks get a little bit of liquidity. Now, if Micron were to actually fall below 600 and you'd have start, but there's no memory headline to cause this. At that point, it would just be pure selling pressure leading the downside move. SanDisk down 4%. I really wonder if let's do a poll in the chat. I really wonder if I'm not willing to call the rotation back to software that quickly. By the way, March ADP private payrolls 109,000 versus 84,000 expected. So once again, we are not getting it's whether it's jolts, the 10-year oil prices, or inflation or labor market. That's like bearish at all. We're just not seeing that. Rotation back to software, yes or no? Nobody cares about the data anymore. No, it's actually true. No one gives a shit about the data. Okay, AMD, let's not lose 400 here. That one definitely, you're seeing some people take profits. The thing about AMD now, it's psychological, right? If you're up a lot and you just saw your portfolio go crazy and now you're seeing your portfolio still go crazy, but not as crazy, does the fear set in of, hey, let me protect some of my gains. Same thing on all the other semiconductor names. And I'm up a lot. Let me not get greedy. Let me take my profits, which could exacerbate the selling. Now, granted, if the dip buyers come in, then it would be a rotation into people getting a cheap entry. But it might also be the smart thing to do for some people. Is it true that even the heat death of the universe is priced in? Dude, the heat death of the universe, when I figured out what that was, this was like 8 years ago. For those that don't know, our star one day will blow up. We have about 4 billion years, so we have a little bit of time. But the sun, which is our biggest star, our closest star, will blow up one day. And when it blows up, Earth is bye-bye. So I found that out about 9 years ago, and going back to the conversation about death, it actually kind of, really, I watched this documentary on it. It was like inevitable. All of our science has proven that, because every star eventually bows out. And if we don't have the sun, we're done, right? I think Elon also knows this, which is why he wants to, become a multiplanetary species. But I had an existential crisis at 18. I was like, oh shit. I was like, no matter what happens, it's like this Earth is gone. And, that gave me a little bit more motivation to like go chase my dreams. I think it's priced in though. This bull market is, I think this bull market, look at the S&P, 730.40. The semis are down, but software, Meta, Microsoft, NVIDIA is enough to hold it. It is hilarious. Meta 616 as Marvell, Micron, and all these names go down. Now, I don't know if that's a full rotation. Lumentum down 7, but it's Shopify. Why is Shopify green? What is so good about Shopify that was bad 20 minutes ago? It's nothing other than semis went down, software goes up. Like, it's actually hilarious. Amit was like, wait, I'm going to die in 4 billion years. I need to chase my dreams. No, exactly, dude. Like, I knew I was not going to live for 4 billion years, but the idea that the planet would be gone, like that kind of messes with your head, bro. It's like, oh, it's like none of this actually matters. Like, it's all going to be gone one day. And then, you talk about the universe and it's expanding infinitely. And, where does it even come from? You have all these questions that start, and these questions are largely irrelevant because there's not really answers to them. But I think philosophically they're relevant because they get you to be like, well, I'm going to get super rich then and enjoy my life. And then, that made me discover the stock market to an extent. So I feel like there is some use for it. What did you guys say on the poll? 56% say no, it is not a rotation back to software. It's a rotation to OSS. Yeah. OSS 1465. Dude, what a banger. 50% up here. Amit discovered mushrooms. Amit smoked weed once and had an existential crisis. Literally, I remember where I was when I watched that documentary. It was like 2018. Yeah, it was 2018. I remember. I think it was like Christmas break or something, or it was one of the spring breaks. And I was just up late at night watching it. I was like, damn. Shit's intense. Gotta live our lives. Bro said, I'm going to enjoy life, then went to watch candles go up and down. Okay, but it's a pretty cool job, though. I mean, some candles go up in stocks you own and you love it. Some candles go up in stocks you don't own and you watch them go up and have FOMO. And then some candles go down in stocks that you don't own and you feel pretty grateful you don't own that shit. And then some stocks have candles that go down, which you do own, and you're like, well, I'm depressed today. How many jobs give you that many types of emotions all at once? Yeah, and then you get to talk about it every day. Microsoft, 415. 415. Be honest, who bought Micron yesterday? This is a safe space. Who bought Micron yesterday at 670, 680? Be honest. It is okay. No one's going to make fun of you. It's life. I've done that plenty of times. Buy something at the short-term top. I definitely do not think that was the top for Micron. I would hope. But it's taking a breather. No, but I bought DRAM. Okay, so I think people have to remember DRAM. DRAM gives you exposure to all the memory stocks. But if you're buying DRAM when the memory stocks are at all-time highs, you are functionally buying the memory stocks at all-time highs. I think this one basic fact is getting it's people are forgetting. It's like, yes, $46 is quote unquote cheaper than $635 because it's an ETF. But if you're buying it at whatever it was 49 yesterday and Micron was at 680, you are functionally buying Micron at 680. So you just have to remember that. It's like my dad. My dad's like, AMD is so much more expensive than NVIDIA. I'm like, Dad, just because AMD is at 400 and NVIDIA is at 200 doesn't mean he's like, yeah, but it's $400. I'm like, yes, but there's a market cap. And he refuses to care about the market cap. He's like, why does that? It's like, he has it's like I'm speaking a different language. He just looks at the price. And I get it. It is what it is. Okay, couple people bought some Micron yesterday at 670. I think you guys are going to be all right. But ultimately, we are seeing a little bit of rotation right here. And I don't think anyone can say that's not healthy. Now, I really wonder how long that's going to last, dude, because at this point, given the nature of this bull market, if fund managers get ready to step in, I mean, maybe these prices get really cheap to some people. EWI, that's up 2. Hut 8 Mining up 33. Applied Digital, that's also up 2. You had Dario yesterday with, what's his name? Jamie Dimon continue to give some warnings about AI. Here's what he had to say as well.
It's very possible for them to lose market value, go bankrupt, completely go bust. But it depends on the response, right? I think there are incumbents today that are going to see very clearly. We have a lot of moat here. The moats here are going away. We're really going to pivot, and we'll do better than we did before. And there are others who are not going to pay attention, who are going to be blindsided, and they're going to have a really bad time.
I asked Dimon if all the spending in the area, potentially $1 trillion over the next year, makes sense.
The way I look at it is that in total, it will make sense. If you want to try to pick the winners and losers, you will have a hard time. So there will be losers and there have to be winners, or people said, I told you so and stuff like that. But the technology itself is so powerful, it's worth $1 trillion of investment. And the investment is way beyond that, by the way. It's in chips, it's in wires, and it's in hardware and all these other various things. Right. So, but technology tends to pay for itself, just not in a straight line.
So you got Dario being the doomer that he is, which maybe he ends up being right and is not as doomeristic. Obviously, I think a lot of people disagree with that. And then you got Jamie Dimon trying to make sense of the spend. Look at ASTS getting a nice 10% move right there. Rocket Lab 4%. There's finally some liquidity that's freed up for the space names again, given the semis are down. So you have both of them agreeing that the spend is necessary, but one of them thinks the spend will, literally destroy humanity. And the other one probably thinks they're going to make tons and tons of returns from doing that. I don't know. I think there's a lot of different perspectives to it, but I disagree with Dario on the doomeristic stuff. I mean, then again, I don't know AI as good as he knows AI. So I side with Jensen on not being doomeristic. I just think society-wise, it's not a good thing. But I also don't. I also don't think that Dario is necessarily wrong, that there are going to be massive layoffs that happen. And it's not something you can necessarily just say, oh, there's going to be more jobs. It's like, yeah, there will, but how exactly is that going to play out for people to feel the comfort and safety that they need to think they're going to be okay? NVIDIA 204.80, as that continues to go green. Micron 634. What are your predictions for Rocket Lab earnings today? I forgot we have Rocket Lab today. We have Rocket Lab, CoreWeave, Iren, SoundHound. We have no, that's tomorrow. Yeah, no, I was right. Rocket Lab is tomorrow, not today. Today is ARM, AppLovin, Fortinet, Axon. Rocket Lab is tomorrow. Well, I don't think they're going to be profitable. I still think they're a couple quarters away from that. Look, Rocket Lab's expensive any way you slice it on its valuation. And I think it's hard to deny that. However, the catalysts around SpaceX, Neutron, and this commercial space TAM that continues to grow, I just think they need to continue their growth rate. I think they're growing at close to triple digits, 120, 130%. I think they just need to keep that up and show more progress on Neutron. I don't think they're going to be profitable. That's okay. But I think the thesis on Rocket Lab right now is nothing about its earnings. It's about SpaceX. Same thing with ASTS. Now, ASTS has been sold off a lot more aggressively, but IGV flipping green. Flipping green. I think SpaceX is really important. Yeah, it's all about space systems and Neutron updates. Because the numbers on Rocket Lab, I mean, they're doing what, like $500 million a year of revenue? 600 million, maybe? It trades at 47 billion. No profits. So this is all narrative. Now, the narrative is really freaking strong. And the narrative makes a lot of sense when you look at SpaceX's opportunity, but they've got to keep playing into that narrative. And the more they do that, I think the better the street feels to treat the stock. Also, the stock, the institutionally, the institutional guys have very high price targets on it, 85, 90. I know it's around that range, but compared to their valuation, the institutional guys really do think they will grow into it. So as long as the earnings continues to prove that they are growing into it, that's what matters. Meta right there, 617. Bitcoin, are we 82? We are 81.7. Not at 82. Rocket Lab did 602 million last quarter in revenue. Did they? No. Annual revenue for 2025, Laura, was 602 million. The Q4 revenues, I was like, if they're doing 600 million, I am totally off. You said last quarter. No, so Q4 was 179. So 600 a year is what they're doing. AMD 408 getting a little bit bounce back. Micron also getting a little bit bounce back. Ken Griffin, he's live. Let's see what he's saying about this market. He did have some comments for Mamdani the other day, and basically said he's not going to be doubling down on New York. First of all, let me get that Ted Turner news, and then we'll get to Griffin. But that just popped up here as well.
To Time Warner, and CNN remains a Warner property, of course, soon to be a part of the combination of Paramount and Warner. But he was a giant. Carl, I bet you can remember as well. I can remember sort of chasing him around when he was so relevant, and he was actually really tall too as a giant, but I mean just a giant of the industry and an outsized personality, of course. When you did get him for an interview, you were never disappointed at his willingness to really say things in a way that we don't typically hear from chief executives these days.
As the remembrances begin to roll in, the phrase "mouth of the South" getting some play, widely known, obviously, for his candor, as you said. But beyond television, land conservation, nuclear proliferation.
All right, here's Ken Griffin.
The president has done a great service to humanity by curtailing and containing Iran's nuclear ambitions. The combination of the strikes on their nuclear facilities last year, this strike or this war this year has set back Iran's nuclear ambitions by years, if not a decade or more. And a nuclear-free Middle East is really important both to regional security and ultimately to the security of Western countries, Europe or the United States, which could be impacted by a nuclear warhead in the wrong hands. And I think we should be very thankful that the president has really worked hard to contain the nuclear ambitions of the Iranian people.
And yet it is so unpopular in this country.
I don't think the president's really made his case to the American people properly, that this is about not only regional stability in the Middle East, which has important ramifications for the entire world, but is also important to Western society's safety. He should have made that case, I think, much more aggressively, much more publicly at the start of or before the start of this round of escalation with Iran.
You know, that echoes, I think we talked a little bit about it yesterday as well, what we heard from Bill Ackman, Bruce Flatt, I mean, big long-term thinking investors about how ultimately, you know, they back the president and what he's doing and see the path for a more stable, you know, safer, prosperous Middle East.
So you got business leaders that are going the opposite of the whole tariffs are bad last year. I mean, Ken Griffin was not a fan of the tariffs, but he actually is a fan of the security angle of the war in the context of how it would help markets. And Bill Ackman said the same thing. This is what he said yesterday about New York.
So where does that leave us at 350 Park?
That leaves us with the fact that we went to Miami and revised our building plan to make it a bigger office building.
You're bailing?
So what do we do at 350 is still a point of discussion internally. But what is no longer a point of discussion is that Miami is now, you know, when we moved from Chicago, there was a debate between New York and Miami. It's unquestionably true that we made the right choice. I'll leave it at that. It's unquestionably true that we made the right choice. And now what the mayor of New York has made clear to my partners, and principally my New York partners, is that we need to double down on our bet in Miami, because we want to be in a state that embraces business, that embraces education, that embraces personal freedom and liberty, and that embraces people having an opportunity to live the American dream. And
I don't know if that means they're exactly not going to be fans of opening new stuff in New York, but obviously they definitely don't, or he definitely was pissed off from what Mamdani said, and we're going to see if that continues to reflect into New York job growth for Citadel. Wow, look at this. Micron going back up. Guess what's going back down? You guessed it. IGV. Software. Palantir going back down again. So again, I just don't think we can call the rotation to semis that quickly. Or sorry, to software that quickly. AMD, once again, 402 to 410. I mean, you're seeing these names continue to, yeah, they're just flip-flopping back and forth. Same with SanDisk. Who bought the Micron dip today? Who bought the 629 Micron dip? I don't know. It is so interesting to see how this market's thinking of this stuff. S&P up another 1%, all-time high, 731.60. Okay, so we are at Tom Lee's level at this point to basically top out. I don't know if it exactly does top out here, but this is where we should be. CoreWeave 6.62%, QQQ up 1.3, Coherence up 1.5, and then Tesla right there at 393. OSS, my goodness, it is headed to 15. Why is OSS up 51%? They crushed their earnings. Also, it is a small cap, remember. That's been the theme of the year, right? It's like, there you go, touch 15. This was 240 million in the morning. It's now almost 400 million. Like, good earnings, catalyst, small cap or smaller market cap, which I know AMD is not a small market cap, but it is definitely a lot smaller than NVIDIA. It's just easier to move. In this case, you know, this one's a micro cap. Wow, Reddit, dude. I really did not think this one would lose the 170s. I thought those earnings were so good. Like, they were better than Meta. Now, granted, Reddit's a smaller company, but they were still, every growth metric was just pushing 50%. They spent $1 million on CapEx, so their margins are incredible. Street's taking her down. Why? Because they need liquidity to buy the Micron dip or to buy the Nebius dip at 179, which is now 182. Hala says, I just sold my $10 OSS calls for over 400%. Congratulations. That is incredible. As a lot of those calls on a 50% day would be moving. I mean, there was a lot of call flow on AMD 400 for this week. So in the morning, those were probably super deep in the money. Now those are not as deep, but you know, they are pretty green. Trump expressed optimism about striking a deal with Iran, which could include Iran exporting its highly enriched uranium to the United States in a phone call Wednesday morning with PBS News. Okay, that's good. Are we doing Technical Thursday? Yes. I will confirm with Jason, but yes, tomorrow. So we're not going to listen to any earnings calls tomorrow. We will start at 4:30. The only thing is I have my Chicago flight tomorrow. So it's at 9:50. Okay, perfect. So yeah, so we should be able to go from like 4:30 to call it 7. Should have a good 2.5 hours of Technical Thursday. And yeah, we should be able to do it tomorrow. So we'll cover earnings, then we'll get right into tea. I'm sure like someone will stream Iren and Jose will probably do CoreWeave. Sam might do Iren. And then Matt probably will do Rocket Lab. And if Matt doesn't do it, someone else will do it. So there will be plenty of people still streaming. Tanner's probably going to do one of those as well. OSS 56% here on the day. Do we short into the meetup? Dude, it has worked 2 times shorting into the meetup. So maybe 3rd time's a charm. But quite frankly, this bull market, I don't know what's going to stop it. I mean, put in the chat. That's a good question. What would stop this bull market? What do you think would stop it? Like legit, give us that 10% pullback Tom Lee is talking about. Nebius, 183. That's a new all-time high. 183.52. That is a new all-time high. Yes, we will cover Rock Lab. We're just not going to listen to the call. We're going to cover all the earnings. We're just not going to listen to the calls. Because you guys want Technical Thursday way more. And so do I, to be honest. It's been a week. But we will still cover the earnings. SanDisk, almost flipping green. Rate hikes. Yeah, but if the Iran war stops and oil comes down, is there going to need to be a reason for a hike? Warsh. That's Tom Lee's reason, right? The Fed's going to test them. I mean, NVIDIA missing massively. Okay, NVIDIA's not going to miss, but I wonder if NVIDIA just doesn't impress the street. Micron, 628 to 650 within what, 10 minutes? I mean, you're not slowing this down as easily. You're just not. Which is actually a good thing for the health of this bull market, to see those dips get bought up that quickly and to not have people panic and get out of it. I don't know. Now, maybe it's a dead cat bounce, but if not, then it's more bullish. Oracle losing 190 back to 188. 4P on Micron is now still around 7. Rock Lab 5%. The bond market, I agree the bond market as well, but the bond market is contingent on inflation. And inflation is not inflation might not be as sticky if oil comes down. Why is Oklo up? So there was a couple of nuclear headlines this morning. Not about Oklo, but about nuclear in general. Yeah, Nano Nuclear signed a strategic MOU with Supermicro to power the next generation of AI data centers with advanced nuclear energy. So NNE is up 15%. Oklo rallying basically with that. Stock Talk will be on tomorrow, 11 a.m. for those that are asking. 11 a.m. He couldn't come on last Friday. 11 a.m. tomorrow. He'll be live on the show. Meta starting to get a red candle as Micron starts to get a green candle. It's like clockwork. At least Meta's not at 600, but if it goes red and Micron goes back to 670, it would be hilarious that the algos have them paired against each other, it feels like. Yeah, LEU also up 5%. Remember when Palantir used to go up? Again, it's one of those quarters where, or one of those years where it's tough to digest, right? But this is also, this is also the dynamic of being an investor, and it's the humbling that everyone has to go through, including myself. 1 year could be one of the best years of your life. And then the next year, the asset that gave you one of the best years of your life might not cooperate, and you have to rotate, or you have to shut the hell up and stop worrying about the stuff that's going up and truly focus on your long-term vision and not care that a Micron's up 75% this year and a Palantir is down 20% and you didn't sell Palantir to get into Micron. And I think there's legitimately two angles to this. There are some people that do not care about all these stocks going crazy because they're in the name that they're in from $20 and they're more than happy that it's at 133, even if it's not at 200 anymore. And then there's other people that are becoming rotational investors, which is, hey, I will ride a name up and then I'm out when I see the need to rotate for whatever reason I'm rotating for. I don't think there's anything wrong with one or the other. Micron at 652, but this year in particular is not an everything bull market. It is a you have to be a good stock picker in the context of selective thematic bull market, which is different than the past 3 years, because the past 3 years was pretty much everything. Qualcomm up 2% as well. Nebius, are we going for 190? She's trying 185. Up 5% right here. My hood cost base is 21. I don't care if it goes from 150 to 70. Yeah. And so here's the thing. Like, if you're one of those investors that cares about taking your money out of something, even if you have a good cost basis and rotating it, then you have to make that decision. That's more trading than investing, even though I don't think that's a bad thing. People try to say it's bad. I don't think that's a bad thing. That's just, that's how you manage a portfolio for certain people. Google almost 400, but there's also some people that don't want to sell their hood at 20. And they don't have unlimited capital, right? So if you don't have unlimited capital to then buy the next hood, which in this case, this year was a Micron or a Nebius, and you have to make a decision of selling and paying taxes, you might have some people that might just not want to do that. And I think that's also okay. But the point is, this year has not been friendly to just being a general bull. You've had to be selective if you want that outsized performance. And, I think everyone who's in the big winners from last year is obviously experiencing that today. IREN, that's up 7. Corning continues to be 12. Google market cap is now 4.8. NVIDIA, it's almost like NVIDIA doesn't want to lose it. NVIDIA's at 4.9. If NVIDIA didn't get the pump today, Google would have overtaken it. Google would have overtaken it. Rotate to Duolingo. Even Duolingo's up today, dude. That's how sad this is. Like, one of the most AI commoditized names in the context of LLMs is up. And some of these other software names can't even think of catching a bid. Upstart, that's down 9. They did not have the best earnings yesterday, as that's taken a hit. Can we check the stock draft? Okay, let's check that. I do think AMD and Nebius are probably helping me in this draft. Yeah, we are pulling away, folks. Matt's at 36. I am at 46. Steve's at 28. Tanner's at 10. Chris is at 19. Got about a month and a half left, but if AMD and Nebius continue to do what they're doing, we probably end up pulling away. This is with Duolingo down 80%. That's how crazy. If I had picked anything that didn't go down 80%, this thing would be like 60, 65% returns. Like, literally, I could have picked anything. Like, what else has been worse than Duolingo? I could have picked anything, even if it was red, and this portfolio would be way better. Which it speaks to the value of just getting a few names right. That's it. You could have absolute losers. Like, to recover from an 80% drawdown as an equal weight inside an ETF, you got to make up for that. So you got to have something that balances it out and covers it. And that's the cool thing about diversification, but it's also, the cool thing about picking the right names that can outperform. Nebius, 185.30. Why did you choose Duolingo? Well, there was a good friend I have in the chat. I'm not going to say his name, but he was spamming it. He's from Singapore. It's my guy. I've known him for like 4 years, and he loves this stock. Like, he fucking loves it. So he kept spamming it. And I was taking like 20 minutes to make a decision, and I was like, screw it. So I just picked Duolingo. But also, outside of him spamming it, like, they are growing 40, 50%. So like, the top line growth was not bad. It's just the AI commoditizing narrative was, really real. And I didn't think of that in the heat of the moment. I was just like, well, they're growing. I know it's expensive, but I need growth. Like, my portfolio was just going for super high beta growth. I'm like, I believe it's a bull market. I don't want to do any safety. I don't need Oxy, even though Oxy did fairly well because of the war. I'm just going to go straight growth. And Duolingo had growth. The problem is they had a horrible narrative, which sucked. So he's no longer a good friend. No, actually, he's actually one of my good friends. He'll be at the Singapore meetup, and he uses the product every day. So he's like, dude, I like it. It's just, it goes back to that Peter Lynch thing. Sometimes the thing you use every day might not, like, you might drink Starbucks every day, but it just might not be the best company to invest in. And forget Duolingo's moat questions. Like, who cares about language learning when memory is in such high demand? I mean, the Micron CEO, there's this clip that's going viral of him basically saying we can only fulfill 50% of the demand of the hyperscalers in 2027, which means we have so much room to grow and so little capacity that it's just a more exciting story than freaking Duolingo or Zeta or SoFi or any of those names. This is what Jensen said yesterday when he was live with ServiceNow.
The amount of computation necessary from generative AI 2 years ago to now agentic AI, it has gone up 1,000% because the AI now has to read a lot more, use tools, reason, generate a lot of tokens. Not only that, the amount of use has gone up orders of magnitude, because now for the first time, AI is doing work. It's doing useful work. And the return on that investment for software companies, for agentic companies like ServiceNow, is completely accretive. And so that time has finally arrived. So
He's trying to get these software. He knows that ServiceNow should not be this low, but it's not working, Jensen. It's just not. If anything, it's getting more people to be like, oh, ServiceNow is going to need a lot more agentic workflows. Guess what? For agentic inference, you need CPUs. Instead of buying ServiceNow, I'm going to buy AMD or Intel. I mean, literally, that is the thought process I think that the institutional guys are navigating with. They're like, okay, this thing will create more demand. I'm not going to buy the thing that is creating the demand. I'm buying the thing that is going to benefit from all the demand. Even if the thing that's creating the demand, like an enterprise application platform, is severely undervalued compared to the thing that will benefit from the demand. Like, I feel like that's how it's playing out. Cynthia, thank you for the $40 super chat. Appreciate it. Thank you, Cynthia. Cynthia Huang. I love it. Got Jensen's last name. Thank you for the super chat. And thank you for being here. Oh, Ori, we are witnessing a shift from software to hardware. Ori, this is hilarious. At 10:22, we are witnessing a shift from hardware to software. At 10:55, we are witnessing a shift from hardware to software. It's crazy, dude. Absolutely crazy. Duolingo did add about 4 million users last quarter, so they're still adding a ton of people. It's just their bookings were down so much, which is the issue. Jackson, thanks for the super chat. Admit, I consolidated the portfolio into 3 holdings: SoFi, Zeta, Amazon, that I believe are long-term compounders to the recent sell-off. Market is at all-time highs. I'm down 10% year-to-date. Did I do the wrong thing? You did not do the wrong thing in the context of objectively what's right or wrong, right? Because in 5 months, if SoFi's at 30, Zeta's at 30, and Amazon is at 310, it is not the wrong. There's no right or wrong. But at the current state of the market, if you're judging yourself based on the 3 compounders that you could have bought, like a Nebius, Micron, and SanDisk, then yeah, you did the wrong thing. But if you judge yourself based on, May 6th of 2026, it's a very hard mental game to navigate when it comes to markets. So no, I don't think you did the wrong thing. But right now, it feels like you did the wrong thing. This is what I'm saying. This bull market is selective. It is not an everything rally. There are obviously sectors that are just not catching the bid. And again, I really believe for people to buy Nebius at 187, they have to sell something that's not a winner for them. So at what point does someone say, I'm out? I actually have a good friend yesterday. A good friend who texted me, 4,000 shares of SoFi at $8. He was out. He's out. He sold it. He's done. And he's looking to put it into something else. He texted me the screenshot. And, he's been a SoFi bull for, it's not Tanner, obviously. But I have another friend who loves SoFi. He has 4,000 shares, $8 average. He officially capitulated yesterday, which also he wanted me to tell everybody that's probably why the stock's going to go up now. But the point is, even he is done with it, right? He wants alpha. He wants returns. He wants gains. SoFi is not delivering that. I imagine so many people are probably in that same boat. And they're just not thinking twice, especially because he was up double. He's not like he bought it at 15. He bought it at $8 3 years ago. So for him, he's like, okay, I made a gain, and now can I put it into something else that's going to go up and not be flat? It is not Tevis. Tevis and Tanner, I would assume, have more than 4,000 shares of SoFi. But no, it was not those two. In fact, they just met with the SoFi IR team, and they kind of got treated like sell-side analysts, which is really cool that SoFi's treating retail like sell-side. But the point is, there are people that are capitulating, and maybe this is the bottom on SoFi. But at this point, if you see Micron go up another, what happens when Micron goes to 700? What happens when that becomes a reality and people feel like, you know what, I missed it at 400, 500, 600. Screw it, I'm buying at 700. Because when that happens, I think once again, you're going to need the liquidity from somewhere. You're going to have to sell some shit to buy it. What do you think of Tesla here? Once again, Tesla is also in a really interesting spot. The valuation you can't really make sense of outside of hopes and dreams, which is okay. But buying Tesla over some of the AI semi names that are going crazy assumes that, at least you can justify, okay, if I'm buying this software company, their earnings growth is better than some of the semiconductor names, or they're accelerating growth. Yeah, Tesla's not even growing earnings, right? So it's like, it's one of those things where you literally have to hope that the AI narrative comes to fruition in terms of robots and FSD, which I'm so freaking bullish on the robots thing. It's just, it feels like it's a couple years away, and that's obviously not being priced into the stock right now, which is probably your alpha, but then again, the market doesn't care about it. 732 S&P, another all-time high. Another all-time freaking high. What do you think Grab is up today? Grab had a great quarter. Like, I know the stock didn't have a massive move, but it had a really good quarter. For Q1, the type of quarter they had was just unbelievable, beating every estimate. And basically the fuel crisis is not affected. I mean, they've become such a monopoly in the region that the fuel crisis doesn't have an impact on them. So that long-term thesis is intact, but once again, emphasis on long-term versus a Qualcomm that's up 2% and 20% for the month, simply because they are seen as another chip play that hasn't run and is potentially going to run. Google right there, really trying for 400. Really, really trying. Where is there another company trying to build a fully vertically integrated fab aside from Tesla? So that's a great question. The problem is the answer doesn't matter, because for Tesla to build a fully vertically integrated fab means free cash flow will be negative for a while. They're going to have to spend more on CapEx. And if Meta, which is growing, Tesla's not even growing. If Meta's growing and can't catch a bid because they're spending on CapEx, what does the street do to Tesla that's not growing, trading at a, 1,000% higher multiple? Sorry, 2,000% higher multiple than Meta in terms of price to earnings, and is spending more on CapEx. Does the street just say, well, this has more potential than Meta, and buy it? Because they already believe it has more potential than Meta. I mean, Meta's at 1.5 trillion, 18 PE. Tesla's at 1.47 trillion, 303 PE. And I'm not even trying to compare the PEs to make a point here, because the PEs are whatever, right? You can overlook that for growth, but there is no growth in Tesla. They haven't grown. So it's like the street's literally going to have to just hope that the growth is going to be so exponential and that they would want to front run it before it happens. And I don't know if the street's willing to do that if they're not even willing to give Microsoft or Meta any love. Now, maybe they are, because honestly, Tesla's more exciting than Microsoft and Meta. I'll admit that any day of the week. But is that enough to catch the bid? Microsoft getting a little bit of green, S&P continuing to still make a move. Tesla's good free cash flow. Tesla does not have positive free cash flow. Again, they negotiated terms to pay their bills post Q1. They have negative free cash flow. They guided for negative free cash flow. Q1 came in positive literally because they have an extra 30 days to pay their bills for the March quarter. And again, free cash flow being negative, it's like, who cares, right? If they're growing, but they're not growing. That's the issue. Like, Amazon's growing, so you can kind of overlook the free cash flow negative because they just accelerated AWS 28%. Now, again, Tesla will get back to growth. It's just, at what point do investors fully decide to price that in? And I don't know if people fully know yet. Is Dell green on the day? SMCI again. Yeah, Dell up another 5. That's an all-time high for Dell. Wow, so Dell pumping on SMCI's earnings. SMCI, it was up 20, now it's up 13. Iran, 60. Nebius is pumping, but Iran's trying to follow. Another 9% day for Iran right here, as that's also trying to get some more love. Why does Tesla humanoids look like figures humanoids? A lot of them look the same, to be honest. The bigger question is which ones actually work inside of a factory. So are you bearish Tesla? No, I'm not bearish Tesla. I don't think it makes sense to be bearish one of the most important physical AI companies on the planet. But once again, for people saying, well, I want to sell my SoFi and get into something that's semiconductor related, the same question, I think, was the original question that someone asked about Tesla. Is like, do you sell your Tesla to get into something semiconductor related? I don't really know the answer to that, but buying more Tesla here versus buying the semiconductor name, or buying more Meta or Microsoft, that's the note of the comparison. When there's no growth, free cash flow is negative, and CapEx is only going up, if the street's buying the stuff that benefits from the capex, is buying the company that's putting up the capex the right idea? And in my opinion, it is. Like, I don't think Meta or Microsoft should be trading at those levels. But that's not, I guess, what the street thinks right now. Sandis flipping green. Yes, flipping green. 13.12 to 14.17. To 14.17. Isn't that bullish, though, because Tesla has more bargaining power in terms of billing terms? Yeah, that's bullish for their billing terms. I'm sure Tesla has some of the best negotiating leverage on the planet. But the point is their free cash flow is still negative. It has nothing to do with their ability to negotiate with suppliers. It has to do with the truth. The truth is their free cash flow is negative. Cash flow is not positive. That's okay. Meta and Microsoft and Amazon also have negative free cash flow. But then it's basically about what's priced in. Okay, Trump had a bunch of quotes with PBS, so I'm going to read them. Trump, Iran war has a good chance of ending. Trump, I feel the U.S. is closing in on a deal. Trump, unlikely to send Witkoff and Kushner. It's possible Iran deal reached before my China visit, which I forgot is in 9 days. Trump, if no Iran deal is reached, we go back to the old ways. Trump, Iran uranium would go to the U.S. under the deal. Iran deal does not includes not using underground facilities. When Trump was asked about China supporting Iran, he said, it is what it is. And then he said, if this doesn't end, we'll just go back to bombing them. He also says, if we make a deal, we'll lighten up sanctions. And Fox News says the U.S. is expecting Iran to respond to several key points within the next 48 hours. Okay. So I guess we're going to see now, as we get the market kind of liking those comments, flipping even more green right here, AMD 408. We'll see if that comes into fruition over the next 48 hours. Now, again, Iran said they rejected the deal already, but if Trump says they're still looking at it, they might have just said that to say that, and they're actually still looking at it. But we have to see. Wow. IIIF just put out a study. They say the global debt has now rose by over $4.5 trillion over the past 3 months to a record $353 trillion in Q1. So the world is in debt to itself by $353 trillion. The US has about 40 trillion of that. That's crazy. That means the US has 11% of the global debt. Yeah, AI will pay the bill, so we shouldn't worry. I mean, it makes your car loan look kind of ridiculous, right? It's like, hold on, we owe someone $353 trillion? Do I really have to pay back this car loan? Tesla 391, Micron. Let's see if this one ends up getting back to 660. 655. If, quote, this time is actually different, could Sandis and Micron reach a 40 PE? Yes. If this time is different, I think that's the reason why people are even thinking of buying Micron and Sandis at all-time highs. You've got to believe this time is, if you don't believe this time is different, how the hell do you justify buying, like any of the parabolic names? We're not talking about the large caps or the hyperscalers. We're talking about the traditional commodity companies that have had booms and busts for the past 40 years. Micron is now closing in the market cap of JP Morgan. They have already overtaken Visa. So it's like, if you don't believe Micron's going to $1 trillion, I don't understand how you could be buying it. And by the way, at 40 PE, Micron is way bigger than $1 trillion market cap. We're talking about many multiples of trillions. Now, I don't know if the street gets that excited about it, but the point is, buying it at 700 billion assumes there's alpha to that many, many multiple trillions market cap. Micron has more call volume than SPY. That is absolutely wild. SPY has 13 million shares, not a ton of volume either today. Micron, 30 million shares of volume. We're 11% of world debt, but 25% of GDP. That's a fair point, which is why we can probably afford to be 11% of debt. No chance I would ever sell my Palantir $11 average or Rocket Lab $18 average to chase something. Yeah, and I just think a lot of us have to be okay with that. If you're not selling your Palantir at 11 to go chase Micron at 600 and you underperform this year, that is okay. Like on an aggregate basis over the next couple of years, even if Palantir is stuck at 100, 11 to 100 will outperform probably buying the S&P, right? Like, so when you compare it with your cost basis versus where the stock can go, compared to the other names that you would have to buy at these levels to chase just to get the same type of alpha, the risk is higher than the reward, right? And so that means 2026 might not be the best year for someone who's all in SoFi or all in Palantir. But I also think that doesn't take away from being all in and being early. Now, if you bought Palantir at $125, yeah, obviously at 135, could go to 150. It's not like it just, you have no edge there. And that's where it might make sense to say, screw it. You know, Palantir at 125 or 120 or 115 is not a meaningful cost basis to meaningfully develop any edge. I'm going to chase the trend. But right now, I think there's a diversion between how the market's thinking of it. Rocket Lab 8186. Trump just said Lilly is committing $4.5 billion across an Indiana manufacturing site to open the first dedicated genetic medicine facility. $4.5 billion. Lilly right there, 991. 991 on that announcement. I think Dell is pumping because of SMCI. I think so. I don't think there's any other. Well, also, I mean, okay, I don't know this as well about Dell, but is AMD one of Dell's larger customers? I know NVIDIA is. I know they have a very tight relationship. Because if Dell is making the CPU server racks as well, I mean, why wouldn't they catch a bid if Intel and AMD are saying we're supply constrained on CPUs? Yes. Okay, so then there's your simple reason. Dell's a proxy to the CPU debate. They mentioned Dell in the call yesterday. All right, so that, yeah, they mentioned Micron, they mentioned Dell. I mean, Lisa Su did say there is an issue with memory. And so all your, core executives are consistently making the case that memory matters. Nebius, did we touch 190? Wow, 100 freaking 90 on Nebius. I mean, it looks like it has a date with 200. It looks like it has a date with 200. Here's the update on Trump and Iran.
Guys, that's right. The news this morning had been that we knew a 14-point peace proposal had been sent from the U.S. side to the Iranians. The Iranian Foreign Ministry had confirmed they were evaluating it, but it was not clear what exactly was in it. But the president confirmed some of the details to PBS. He said that one point here, Iran's highly enriched uranium would be exported to the United States. That's something that has been a non-starter for the Iranians in the past. He also said Iran would pledge not to operate its underground facilities, enrichment facilities for one, missile storage, things like that. He did not confirm any sort of specific timeline, but he said Iran would operate, quote, in goodwill for a long period of time. So not exactly clear what the U.S. pledged there, what the Iranians are looking at for a timeline. He just says a long period of time. But crucially, guys, in reading the transcript of this interview, it's very clear that Iran has not yet agreed to any of this. The president saying, quote, if they agree, it's over. If they don't agree, we bomb. And on the outlook overall, the president was sort of optimistic, but also a little bit sanguine. He said, I think it's got a very good chance of ending. He said possibly even before his China trip, which is next week. He also says, but I felt that way before with them, so we'll see what happens. So a little bit more clarity here on some of the points, at least, that the two sides are discussing or considering, but also some real clarity as well on the fact that the Iranians haven't agreed to any of this. A lot of this in the past has been a red line for Tehran, so we'll have to see how they respond once we get some sort of a response from them, guys.
He was asked by PBS about China's indirect support for Iran and responded, it is what it is. I mean, is the sense among some that this is a patch to get through next week's summit?
Yes, I've seen that analysis put out so far this morning. Signum Global Advisors, among others, looking at that China trip as sort of a pivot point, or at least a line in the sand, something that the president would not want to be in active war with Iran when that happens. So maybe keep these negotiations going, keep the ceasefire going, keep things sort of at a simmering point, at a good point before that trip. After that, maybe tensions resume, but not wanting it to be on the front burner. And Carl, the China angle is such a fascinating one right now because we know Iran's foreign minister met with China's foreign minister today. And the readouts from both sides are really clear. They say things like Iran trusts China, that they're looking forward to China taking a continued active presence, not only in figuring out this conflict, figuring out an end to this war, but also building a regional framework moving forward. So there's also this idea that one outcome, whether delivered or not, of this war could be an empowered China in the Gulf region.
Megan, thank you for that. A lot to process, and we'll learn more in the coming days. Megan Cassell outside the White House. Still to come this hour, Disney popping after reporting Q1 results.
All right. I mean, the market, once again, kind of fading. Like a Micron, 657. The market fading it. Meta going down, of course, as its inverse semis, but still a little green, up from 605. I mean, I don't know. I feel like this is more bullish than not if the war is getting closer to an end. At this point, it's literally all politics going back and forth, but this thing is going to be over. And if it is, hood's flipping green. I feel like we should be going up. JTB, thanks for the super chat. Can you talk about why ASTS dropped? So the two things that happened to ASTS, their Blue Origin launch didn't go well, which really messed them up. It was more Amazon's fault, or Jeff Bezos' fault, you should say, but not really ASTS's fault, but that didn't go as well as planned. That was 2 weeks ago. That's what really started taking a hit. And then Rakuten, one of their largest shareholders, sold off a good chunk of the stake. So that selling officially stopped last night as per regulatory filings. That's why I think this thing is getting a bid. But I also would say that space momentum died down, right? So you had a launch fail, you had a big institutional sell, and then you had space sentiment just go away because people were buying Micron as it hits back up to 660. So I feel like you're gonna need some of that stuff to come back to get space to be excited. Same thing with Rocket Lab, Lunar, etc. Yeah, now ASTS's valuation, that's a whole different question. If we're just talking about catalysts, the valuation has always been debated for a while, but and when you do trade at that type of premium valuation, it doesn't, one thing goes wrong, boom, you get hit. So if 3 things go wrong, yeah, they don't make chips. I could have just summarized by saying they don't make chips. Anytime someone says, why is the stock down? They don't make chips. That's it. ServiceNow, do they make chips? No. Palantir doesn't make chips. Duolingo doesn't make chips. That's why. That is why. Adobe, they can maybe show you a 3D model of chips, but they don't make it. Wall Street Journal, a new proposed U.S.-Iran memorandum to end the war will not resolve issues around the Strait of Hormuz and will only call for Iran to ease its control for the Strait. Okay, that's per the Wall Street Journal. Again, I don't think the market cares. It's like as long as they think inevitably oil's coming down, bullish. 732 S&P. Dude, is Frito-Lay's a public company? How has that not been memed up by Wall Street Bets? Oh, Pepsi. It's under Pepsi. What if someone writes a thesis to go long Pepsi because they make chips? It would be one of the most epic Wall Street Bets stories ever. And I feel like if we actually rallied Pepsi, oh my gosh, how funny would that be? They make the best chips, yes. Redwire is up 9%. Yeah, Rock Lab, ASTS, space names have been really in a ugly drawdown past couple of weeks. Redwire is now up 4% this year, dude. It was at $14 in January. That January pump on small caps was also pretty deceiving because you had a lot of names, especially a lot of the drone stocks that have just not reached anywhere back to the levels they were at in January. Nabius, officially 190. There you go. Nebius has done basically 5% a day for the past 3 weeks when you aggregate it, something like that. 3 to 4% a day. Ryan Cohen was good yesterday. Ryan Cohen just doesn't like freaking CNBC because he was on Fox with Charles Payne and on TBPN, and he explained in full detail how he's going to try to buy eBay. Like, I think he was legit trolling CNBC or something because he was in a good mood. He was laughing. He was explaining the details. He was talking. He was saying, thanks for having me on your show. With CNBC, he was dead silent. Like, I don't know what the 4D chess is that he's playing here, but he definitely wasn't excited about it. 17% SMCI. Is that screen? Yeah, maybe he was stoned on CNBC. Maybe. But he definitely just have, or maybe he saw the pushback and was like, okay, I need to actually explain how I'm going to do this. Iran 60, giving us some love. I just hope Iran's not putting out all these press releases and earnings or these acquisitions and stuff, and then we have a crappy earnings. That would really suck. It would be nice for them to follow it up with a really good earnings, but we're going to have to see tomorrow. ARM is also going to be interesting today. What if ARM reaffirms what AMD and Intel have been saying about CPUs? Because what if that means ARM is going to 300? I mean, ARM trades at 60 times sales. It's basically at all-time highs. What if the street's like, all right, we bid up Intel, we bid up NVIDIA, we already bid up ARM, but what if we need to bid it up more? I mean, NVIDIA was also up, or AMD was also up so much going into the print, but it went up more. It went up more. Does ARM make chips? There you go. That's the only question that matters. Micron 662. So the dip to 628 immediately bought, at least within 30 minutes. Amazon flipping green, Meta once again going down. Lumentum, this one has not been able to get any recovery, although they had a really good earnings. Big Bear goes red. Lucid's down. They had a crappy earnings. MicroStrategy, basically based on Bitcoin, Amcor goes red. GameStop up a little bit. And then Cloudflare has been one of the better software names, as they are being seen as an, I guess, internet agent infrastructure name. As more agents are on the internet, Cloudflare has more opportunities. Yeah, NVIDIA's not letting go of 5 trillion. There you go, back to 5 trillion, 205.70. It is not letting go of 5 trillion. Google, 395. Who had the better earnings, Lumentum or AMD? Definitely Lumentum on the magnitude of the beat. But AMD's growth forecast for CPUs, I mean, look, optics is a massive market, but AMD's, I mean, the way they're talking about it means there should be theoretically 8x more CPUs than what there currently are in production right now. And if that's the case, then that's likely not slowing down. Jassy, he was on yesterday as well, and this is what he said about AI in the current state of the markets.
Going to reinvent every single customer experience we know, and altogether new ones we never imagined. And if you look at the pace that things are growing, I mean, I used in the letter the example of after the first 3 years of AWS, we thought we were growing really fast, and we were about $56 million in revenue. And after the first 3 years of this inflection of AI, or this incarnation of AI, our run rate's over $15 billion, 260 times what it was the first 3 years of AWS. And we thought we were growing fast with AWS. So when you have shifts that are this momentous, you want to make sure that you invest in such a way that you can pursue the opportunity as broadly for your customers as possible, as well as for, I think not just our customers will benefit, but our shareholders and the company as a whole will be a very different company 5 to 10 years from now, because we're betting big like this than it would otherwise be if we were conservative.
Once again, if it's not stopping, if they are fully ready to just keep going, wow, NVIDIA joining the party today, 5%. And that's where this whole game continues to be, I think, a lot more exciting for people. Okay, so NVIDIA doesn't get the silent treatment today. S&P keeps going. Micron and SanDisk recovered. I ran above 60. So then the question is software. IGV, red. So software, I guess, taking the bulk of the beating. Meta, I mean, it's up, but 620 got rejected. Back at 612. And then you've got Microsoft, which is the same as Meta, got rejected at 418. So Microsoft and Meta kind of trading side by side. And maybe the inflows get from them to the semi names again. Nebius moving up even more, 190. Atlassian also down 5. Salesforce down 2. Adobe down 2. Zeta down 4. Palantir down 3. So market's not too upset at NVIDIA today, but they, I guess, are taking it out on the semis. Now, ANET, although that's not a semi name, earnings just weren't the best. That's why that's down. Ouster, I didn't look too deep into the earnings, but this was down a lot more. It was down like 16 yesterday. Now it's down 5. LiDAR company works with NVIDIA. 1.72 billion market cap. So nice recovery, even though that's still down. And then TMDX down 22. OSS, though, man, this is the winner today. Goodness, dude. 60% on the day. That is a fun one. I have to go through the earnings. I have not even really... I looked at the top line numbers, and they were good. But I don't know if I want to trim any here if the earnings were really good, you know? So I saw the top line numbers. Definitely deserved a pump. I didn't know it would go up 58%, but... And we'll have Stock Talk on tomorrow at 11 a.m. So we'll be able to talk a bit more about this one as well. ServiceNow, yeah, that one's still down. That one's still down. It's not even just down, dude. It's down 3%. Like, it's just straight up nothing today for the software names. Hut up 32%. They had their... How many gigawatts? I think it was 9.5 gigawatt deal for Hut. That's a lot of gigawatts. And that's, or no, it's not 9.5 gigawatts. It's 352 megawatts. So it was $9.5 billion. Yeah, 9.5 gigawatts is crazy. 15-year, 352 megawatt lease, $9.8 billion deal for a data center lease at the Texas Beacon Point campus. So you're likely going to get a pretty big deal following that up to also make a move. NVIDIA is getting massive 0 DT calls. The market has changed with more options. I don't doubt memory names will be next to add more options expirations. Yeah, I mean, the memory names have already become the like biggest flow in terms of volume. Or they're not the biggest. Tesla and NVIDIA still are up there, but Micron has been making the top 10 list pretty much every day for the past couple of weeks. SanDisk is just it's a harder stock because it costs so much. So far today, Micron had 423,000. SanDisk had 136,000. But, you know, still a decent chunk on its size. And then NVIDIA, 206.80. 206.80. All right, so I think that is it for today. Overall, headlines are green across the board outside of software and fintech based on the Trump-Iran potential negotiation that looks like it's going to become more real. Oil's down, 10 years down. Stocks are up. The semis, every dip so far has just been a buy. Micron 627 to 667 like it was nothing. S&P all-time highs. And then once again, the semiconductor data center names continue to gap up, whether it's a Corning, whether it's a SMCI. They're holding on. And then OSS, just massive small cap winner today, up 58%. Meta and Microsoft basically trading the same. NVIDIA being the exception of going up today. Usually, at least for the past couple of days, it's gone down with Microsoft and Meta. That one diverging from Microsoft and Meta. Maybe Microsoft and Meta join the party, but as of now, Google's taken a lot of those flows, and the semi-names are taking a lot of those flows. So for earnings today, we will have let me pull it up. We will have ARM, AppLovin, IONQ, Fortinet, Axon, Kratos, Coke, Snapchat, DoorDash, Symbotic, Redwire, Warner Brothers, Dutch Bros, Sezzle, AMPX, Fastly, Flutter, and Beyond Meat. That'll be fun. And Zillow. So we got a lot of earnings today. We will get through all those earnings. We'll see what numbers they can put up. Hopefully it's better than not. But, I mean, honestly, this market is driven by the semis. ARM will be the most important one today because AppLovin's also really important, though, because the AppLovin CEO has been doing all the podcasts recently. I think he is feeling a lot more confident about the business. Yes, Coherent as well. That's a big one for photonics. So AppLovin for software, Coherent for photonics, and then ARM for CPUs. Who knows if ARM even raises the estimates higher and then Intel and AMD start pumping with ARM after hours just because. So that'll be very important to see. Word of the day, vociferous. I've heard this word before. Loud and forceful in expressing opinions or feelings. The most vociferous voices in the market are often the least disciplined. Okay, that's what we got. I definitely think I'm saying this word the right way, but only because I've heard it before. If I didn't hear this before, I'd be like vociferosis. Like, it would have been so bad. All right, that is it. Thank you, everybody, for joining. We'll be back on the close. We'll see what we got going on. Keep going from there. Again, a green day, green market. I know it's not every single part of the market, but it is still pretty damn incredible to see the market get this momentum. And quite frankly, if this Iran war really does come to an end and maybe Trump negotiates with Xi and we get more chips heading to China over the next coming weeks, you might have some more catalysts. Sell in May, go away hasn't worked, basically. So far, sell in May, go away hasn't worked. And hopefully that can continue. All right. Thank you, everybody. I'll see you guys for the market close. Have a good one.